This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of what if Naruto left the village after the fourth Shinobi War. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
No, I'll change things here. And I'll go through an official wedding if you want, he murmured. I'll do it right this time. Her father should be there. The man laughed. That he should. It's unfortunate yours is no longer around. Namikaze. He gave a grimace. Your father was a good Hokage. You will make an even better one. And have my support. Then, just maybe, our clan can finally make the progress it needs to and she and those in the future can be happy. When Naruto realized Hinata's hand was gone, a wave of relief passed through him. He looked over in a moment of panic. Her hands were cupped over her mouth as she sat. She whimpered a little and closed her eyes. You okay? Her face was horribly pale as she shook her head. Excuse me. She hurried out after saying that, and Ko, her guardian, soon followed. Naruto hadn't realized Hiyashi had released his hand because he had been so absorbed in their conversation. He looked at her plate, wondering if she had been offended by the fish on it. Hanabi, the younger sibling, pursed her lips. It's been a while since she last did that, huh, father? Somberly, the man shook his head. I don't think it's that. They were undoubtedly discussing Hinata's history of fainting or exhibiting other symptoms of shyness. Her father was correct, though. That wasn't this. He stood and bowed awkwardly, saying, I'm going to check up on her. Excuse me. He didn't blame himself for reverting to his old insults because he was so concerned about Hinata. She was crouched over a toilet when he discovered her through the Hyuga maze, which they called a house. Ko was massaging her back and holding her hair for her. Was she? That was met with a soft moan and a splatter sound. He looked away and said, Hey, you okay? He let go of the hasty change he had made to divert the other residents' attention. She coughed and said, yeah, after a moment. After cleaning herself with the towel Ko gave her, she went up to Naruto, wanting to give him a hug but knowing better than to do so in this state. Regardless, Naruto pulled her into an embrace. He asked Ko to leave them, peering over her shoulder. After bowing, the guardian departed. She said, I'm sorry you had to see that, in a shy whisper. It's okay. I understand. You sick? No, she muttered hesitantly. Naruto, I'm. With a soft voice, he drew away from her and looked at her with curiosity. What? Her eyes filled with tears. I think it's okay, you can tell me. The fox had acknowledged her that night they had spent together, and she did the same for him. He had even said something. A caution. He would also not be the first. The rain was where it all started. A woman pulled her aside. The woman with a piercing beneath her pale lips and an origami flower in her hair. Additionally, she had issued a warning. Pain rose in Hinata's chest as she recalled Naruto's wish to start his own family. I just caught the flu, she said, sobbing. I'm sick. He put his arms around her and gave her a firm embrace, saying, Hey, it's okay. His wide smile only served to increase her tears. Just have Sakura give you some of her super medicine and you'll be over it quick. He would be able to see the essence that was not hers if he had her eyes. Neji had approached her about her abrupt departure from brunch a few hours after he had left, since he couldn't stay for long without being noticed. The fact that Ko must have also spoken to him didn't help either. Ko was a decent man who genuinely cared about her welfare. He had therefore made the effort to attract a busy Neji's attention and divert him from his current responsibilities, even if she had instructed him not to bring it up. So Neji sat on the porch beside her. Are you alright? Yes. I just got too excited, that's all. Nervous, you know. The Byakugan tells me otherwise. There was some harshness in that. He is aware. He knows, goodness. He's lucky I hadn't seen it before or I would have really killed him. Does the idiot even know? No, his hum was sympathetic. Perhaps it's for the best. Things are too chaotic right now. Not to mention neither of you are ready to settle down. She muttered, even if the entire clan rejects me, will you still be with me? Of course. And I'll always protect you. Me and Ko, and your father. You're not alone here, understand? She covered her lower abdomen with her hand after nodding. Would you be his godfather too? Her cousin nodded, much to her confusion. Naruto once protected you with his life, he replied, and I will do the same for his child. She let out a breath and closed her eyes. Thank you. Only a Sharingan would have been able to detect the tiny chakra trigger. It lasted just a moment. Kakashi wasn't the only one with a Sharingan, so it had to. However, he was aware of the impending stupid move and had anticipated it, unlike the other party. In one of the shopping areas, he came upon a young child strolling down a busy street. Except for a pair of vivid red glasses, he was dressed in muted hues to blend in. The X. Anbu was drawn to this, as it was undoubtedly intended to be. His hand went to the child's arm and he said, "What say we go get you replacement glasses? There's a crack in yours." "Ah, thanks mister," he said with a laugh, having a little too much fun pretending to be a kid. Kakashi escorted him into the back room of one of the stores they had arrived at. By now, stock workers would have finished, so there was no need to cause any disruptions. Safe, Naruto eventually removed his glasses and prepared to execute a release, but Kakashi gave him a stern shake of the head. "Don't." Naruto gave an eye roll. "It's safe." The way he stood impatiently emphasized his tendency to dislike transformations. However, it was much simpler to unconsciously allow your cloaked chakra to return to its natural flow after completing a transformation. It was not a mistake Naruto could afford. "How long have you been here?" "Well, I kinda had brunch, but no one outside of the people directly around Hinata saw me, and I know for a fact that Danzo doesn't have any spies implanted there. They're already too innocent and wrapped around his fingers to suspect anything from. Still, out of the estate, even in it, it won't be long until one of his sensors catch on to you." "I know. But I'll be gone before then." "Why are you still here then? It's too dangerous. And if Yamato sees you, he'll arrest you." "I should, but..." In his brunette child form, Naruto grinned and bounced a little. Then he became serious, saying, "Thanks, sensei. I just had to check up on you as well, and let you know about my messenger bird. It's a crow. He'll be here in about 3 days' time. Meet him in the spot, you know the one, and send him back. Keep me informed on anything Danzo does. And who's still with me? I know Hinata promised she would help rally our class when it came to it. Keep them free from Danzo's lies." Kakashi gave nod. His eyes narrowed as he looked at Naruto. "I will. Although, something you said at the summit concerns me." Naruto moved. The real identity of the masked man had been forgotten. Uchiha. Obito. Its rumor would have spread like wildfire by now. It would be the next hot topic, aside from the fact that the host of the Kyuubi started a war. As Kakashi waited for him to elaborate, all he could say was, "I'm so sorry for your loss." Kakashi shook his head in denial when he didn't. "You're wrong, Naruto. Obito died saving me. You never knew him." All Naruto could do was recline into a box in the tower and allow its shadow to cover his face. "I wish I was. The day I learned it, some part of me died with that fallacy. I keep wanting to believe he did die as the hero who inspired me. But no, I'm sorry, but he's lied to you this entire time. He's no hero." Kakashi's one visible eyebrow arched downward in anger. "Not Obito, Naruto. You don't understand. I was there, that boulder. Crushed like half of him. I know because I saw his scars, but he survived. If he survived, then why didn't he come back? Why would he be a part of the Akatsuki and have held you prisoner? It doesn't make sense. Naruto. I saw the medical report Sakura filed on you when you came home. The Obito I knew. He would never do those things to our sensei's own son." He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. Kakashi was now aware of it. He spoke in a low voice. "It's because the real Madara broke him. And he tried to pull that same crap on me to prove a point, and he almost succeeded, but I recovered. But he never has. Even so, there's still one part of him that hasn't let go of the past, but his views are warped, and his mission to protect that past is corroded." "Rin." "Yeah. Rin," said Naruto, furrowing his brow. How was Kakashi aware of it? He had nailed it, even though it was true that they had been on the same team. Apparently something happened to her, and he wants to bring her back through. This made sense now. His infinite Tsukuyomi. In a way his pupil could never understand, Kakashi gazed to the ground as the burden on his shoulders suddenly became heavier. All of Naruto's significant trials, whether past or present. The Kyuubi, his father's sacrifice, his mother's passing, the masked man's assault on Konoha, his capture. "Naruto," he said. "I owe you an apology. Never end up where I am. Protect your people no matter what." The boy nodded, determination shining in his eyes. He sat at the bar of the restaurant and gazed at the menu. Being pitifully undecided. In other words, he had no idea why he had come here at all. Outside, a yellow twilight shone on the village, creating a cozy, homey atmosphere. The modest Ichiraku sat in the last of the light, the fabric above the entrance fluttering ever so softly in the wind, adding to the serene ambiance. After a long day of grading papers, Iruka's siren call was too strong for some parts of her to ignore. He still couldn't bring himself to place an actual order, though, as he sat there watching the stream of people come and go, completely unaware of his still presence. He said, "Just give me a few moments," to Ichiraku Tuchi, the owner, who was now exhausted. Iruka. Only that cherished cook would understand what was so deeply upsetting him. Iruka, however, shook his head. With a sigh, Ichiraku returned to the kitchen and gave another command. At that moment, a new guest entered, a man who sat down directly next to Iruka. Inquisitively, he opened a newspaper and started reading it, making every page turn seem 1,000 times louder than it should have been. Crinkle, crinkle. Iruka gazed at his menu once more. Miso, tonkatsu, shio, shoyu, and even a ramen burger that was experimental. Disinterested, he lowered the menu. Not because the food was poor. On the contrary, Ichiraku's home brewed noodle dishes were the best. It's simply. There were echoes of the past in every word on that menu. As he slurped his noodles loudly, the young ghost bouncing up in excitement filled the seats next to him as they screamed it, hollering like a child. And his smile. That priceless, eerie smile. A grin more radiant than the sun. He would stop at nothing to see it again, Kami. To have it cast that light that made you smile too, filling the deteriorating village. To believe in anything, to do anything. But no, that smile had vanished, along with a lot of priceless memories. It was the beginning of a new era, one that appeared dismal in the absence of light. Iruka raised his eyes again and rubbed his temple as the image gradually dimmed. The man next to him, who was holding the newspaper so it covered his frame, hadn't placed an order either. It seemed to absorb him. The date in the corner of the soiled paper was too obvious for Iruka to ignore. October 30th. His birthday was so many days ago, and there has been no update. Last year at this time, Iruka would still be working to rebuild his finances after giving his young student all the ramen he desired for his birthday. They started doing it every year. Until this year, that is. His already non-existent appetite grew even more sour as he thought about it. He was unsure of his reason for being here today. It wasn't as though he would suddenly and magically reappear. I have too many memories of this place. When his neighbor began speaking, he put his palms on the table and prepared to get up. Man, he uttered, seemingly speaking to Iruka. Things have really gone to hell here, since that pain attacked. Iruka was shocked to see a man with gray hair when he pulled down the paper, assuming the man was young based on his vocabulary. He might be in his 60s. He nodded, not wanting to be impolite. I guess you can say that. You, a tourist? Why anyone would come here was beyond his comprehension. The elderly man grinned. Something like that, young man. But I've been here before, and can't help comparing the thens and the nows. I guess you could call me a bit of a ghost. After giving a nod, Iruka fastened his messenger bag to his shoulders. Everyone feels that way. Now that they were the only people remaining in the stand, Tucci went back to the two, specifically Iruka, and waited for him to say the customary thing. Since then, he hadn't eaten there. He prepared to depart with a solemn bow, saying, I'm not hungry. I'm sorry. However, it appeared that the elderly cook was obstinate today. I know it's been over a month, Iruka, but something tells me the kid's all right. A shadow hung over Iruka's eyes as he froze. A chilly wind blew outside, carrying with it shredded paper and other trash. I apologize, Ichiraku. Not today. All right, Iruka, but I got a new original dish I want you to try, soon. When you can, of course. It's a mixture of some of his favorite ingredients. Sure. He had no intention of returning, as much as he hated to offend Ichiraku. Never. His arm was seized by a wrinkly hand. You're leaving, lad? I am. Without even eating? Yes, he said, scornfully ignoring the hand. He paused, then said, in fact, let me treat you, with a startling sense of optimism. It'd be a shame though, to come all the way here without a bite. Before Iruka could object, the elderly man dragged him back to the bar and slapped the menu down while yelling for the owner and head cook. Hey, Ichiraku. I'd like 2 of that new dish, filled to the brim. A significant portion of his pay for this week, since the academy is still recovering, was worth that special. Oh, sir, I can't. Hush, young man. I insist. In fact, I'll get offended if you don't let me do my good deed of the day. But sir, you young'uns have no respect for your elders, do ya? Why, in my day. Iruka winced. This guy was causing a stir. People were stopping and staring as they walked outside, curious to find out what the raucous excitement was about. He had never encountered someone who so obviously fit the stereotypes of older people. Thank you, he muttered as he sat back down, not wanting to embarrass himself anymore. As Ichiraku watched Iruka drop his bag, he hummed in agreement. It's been a long time since I got to serve my second favorite customer, if you don't mind me saying. Iruka reddened. In fact, he hadn't had any ramen in a bowl, carton, or package since. While they waited for their food, the quintessential old man stirred his drink. You want to talk about it? He asked quietly at the start. Iruka shrugged, his desperation clearly visible. Honestly not, sir. The man's eyes glowed a vivid blue, hidden beneath a bushel of wild gray eyebrows. Maybe this was the reason behind his subsequent actions. Simply put, it bubbled over. It's just. I had a student. He was taken when Pain attacked. This was the same man who killed his sensei. It started with Master Jiraiya. I'm sure you've heard that name. He's one of the 3 sages and he taught my student, and when he was killed on a mission, it tore my student apart. This was a man who took him on long pilgrimages and taught him his favorite jutsu. He sighed. He loved him like a father, and when he was killed, I almost didn't think he would recover. He didn't eat, didn't talk to anyone. But he pulled through, and I was so proud. But then Pain attacked our home and now he's gone, and I don't even know if he's still alive. Or if he'll recover from losing another sensei. Pain killed his team head, Kakashi of the Sharingan as well. Then the 5th Hokage passed, also one of the 3 sages and a person he cared about deeply. Sir, he never had many people in his life until much later, and now when he does, he's taken such hard blows. It just bothers me to no end that he's going through all this. And when they're not, I'm still here. Their shinobi skills were far superior to mine. The life of a shinobi is often befuddled by such circumstances. You couldn't even think about it. I wasn't always there for him, you know. I was one of the superstitious lot that saw my parents die from the Kyuubi attack. And for the great fox to suddenly disappear and a baby to come from nowhere, strange animal. Like markings on his face. It would be 12 years before I even acknowledged him right. I don't even know how I called myself a teacher back then. Iruka's eyes were tight as he squeezed his glass. The man muttered, it'd be easy to make that assumption, in a way that is almost consoling. Still doesn't mean it's right. But, that's not the end, now is it? He had smiled so softly at the end that Iruka couldn't help but look at him inquisitively. Then Ichiraku, holding 2 steaming bowls of ramen, walked over to the 2 men. Here you guys go. Iruka's face was greeted by the delicious scent of steam rising up. He stared down at the vibrant ingredients while using his chopsticks to stir the broth. One of them was disc, shaped and bright white, with a pink swirl encircling it like a tiny wind gust. Hey, man, if this kid is the one you care about so much, he must be alright. Huh? He asked, looking at the elderly man. If he was trained under the great Jiraiya, he must be some guy. I bet he's out, right now, fighting the fight. Iruka gave a gloomy laugh. The man's noodles were slurped. Is that so hard to believe? There's so many rumors about him I don't know what to believe anymore. Some say he's dead already, and the Akatsuki's just charging their weapon. Others claim he's a rogue, and get this, some say he joined the Akatsuki, but either way, he's still not back home. The man put down his chopsticks. Maybe he has his reasons. I mean, you said the 5th Hokage died. Would he approve of the new guy? Iruka sneered and then grinned grimly. Although he didn't know much about Danzo, he didn't seem like the kind of Hokage the child would have liked. The man laughed and said, he must have his reasons, and in any case, you must eat now. This is good and I paid a lot of money for it. The elderly man was oddly agitated. After inhaling deeply, Iruka eventually raised his chopsticks with the noodles dangling from them and took a bite. The flavor was superb. The tangy broth was the ideal starting point for the incredibly rich ingredients that melted in his mouth. Iruka was certain that the old cook had spent countless hours perfecting the soup, and it was evident. The ideal fusion of his favorite ramen ingredients. And aside, that one component. And? Asked the elderly man. He bowed his head and said, this is perfect. The memories associated with his student's name made it extremely difficult to even think about. Recollections and a reminder of all the unimaginable fears he harbored. His eyes grew warm as he said, Naruto. Naruto would have loved this. I wish he could taste what Tucci has made for him. I'm sure he would. No, will. You bet he'll be back. Can't stop believin'. Iruka suspected Naruto would also adore this geezer. They had similar speech patterns. Ironically, they also had some of the same behaviors. In grateful silence, he finished the remainder of his bowl, and the old man shook his head when he put down his last bit of Ryo to tip him. No, let me. But, I insist that you let me fully treat you. Another part of Iruka wanted to laugh, so he shook his head and added in his mind, or I'll make a scene. He thought about this for a while. It had been a long time since he had felt the need to laugh. How strange that this elderly man was reviving these emotions. The man then reached into his pocket and pulled out a massive wad of Ryo. When the enormous wad hit the bill, Ichiraku's eyes appeared to have burst from their sockets. The odd elderly man smiled. Keep the change, man. And consider it for this business's future. I'd like to see this place expanded before I come back, because frankly, of all the places I've traveled you still have the best ramen. Thank you, kind sir. He turned to Iruka, who was equally shocked, and, Iruka, let me say this before we depart, I'm sure if he was here, he'd have nothing but appreciation for you, sir. Those days of childhood count for nothing when you've helped so much since then. And I'm sure, if he could, he'd treat you himself to Ichiraku's most expensive dish for all the times you had done to him. Iruka nibbled his lip. I didn't reveal my name to him. Thanks. With a laugh, the man rose from his stool and prepared to go. Iruka followed him out, but the man tapped his shoulder before he turned to head for his new apartment. Here, don't forget this. But I didn't. He took Iruka's hands and wrapped them around something made of metal and cloth, and a faint murmur. The man was already well up the busy street, partially obscured by the crowds of people, before Iruka could ask him what the purpose was. But the old man turned and smiled just before he vanished forever. It was more than a smile. It was that devious, innocent one that was unmimicable and could only belong to one person and one person only. A ray of sunshine pierced the clouds, and as Iruka's hand tightened around the remains of an extremely old headband he had previously given to an old pupil, a tear ran down his cheek. And he heard the whisper of the smiling figure. Thank you, Iruka, sensei. He was sitting in his throne-like seat, surrounded by exquisite items, ivory and silver decor, and the fur of exotic animals that were now resting far from home. Even the setting, which seemed to be elegant and bright, could not be darker. In its context, in its goal. This location, it was pure darkness. A hooded figure, the very embodiment of this darkness, emerged from behind the seat. The shadow's eyes flashed white, and the person seated bowed his head momentarily to acknowledge his presence. He awaited his instructions, which he received right away. I need 10 times more bodies supplied to me. After a moment of surprise, he responded. We are already supplying you with as much as we can retrieve and preserve with seals. The man could see his face as the shadow drew down his hood. The way his eyes were slitted into snake-like shapes. His lips formed a warning frown, and a tongue followed, licking his lips in a reptilian manner. A creature that gave one a shiver. He also didn't arrive by himself. A snake menacingly coiled itself around the man seated. You will have to do better. Oh, new daimyo, if you wish to keep your position. SSSSSSSs. The marble seat made the knuckles clench. I will get you more, then. But it will require more manpower and outreach. You have an entire village of people and resources. Utilize it. Oh, and before I forget, the supply of prisoners must be alive, as well. Then came a low, irritated moan. Alive? We have always just supplied corpses until now. A hiss of anger was heard. My jutsu calls for living hosts. I do apologize for my questions, but I'm lost. Keeping so many living prisoners reined in will be more trouble than it's worth. An old friend of Orochimaru gave a gloomy laugh. The apple of the man's neck bobbed in a nervous swallow as a cold finger traced across it, saying, You do not question me. I thought this was quite clear. And if you have a problem, I could take you for a sacrifice. But it's best we don't complicate the system we have. Do I make myself clear? SSSSSSSs. Yes. Kabuto. A young slave stepped forward and produced a parchment with a snap of his fingers. The scroll was passed to Kabuto with a low bow. Monthly supplies that meet the quota exactly. Kabuto always paid close attention to details. After reviewing it, he gave it a nod of approval. Good man. I'll be back for the sacrifices next time, you'll know when. And he disappeared, disappearing into the shadows as swiftly as Kabuto had arrived. When he was certain that there was no trace of him left, the man spat. I hate that guy. Walks around like he owns the place. But he's no Orochimaru. Just an old imp and half of one at that. The man frowned. He might have had the sound to himself after Orochimaru died. However, they are compelled to continuously provide for this man who did not even remain in their village. They were being held back by it. He must be taken care of. The man turned to face the source of the voice. He had his progress reports with him as he entered. Noritaka, he said, gathering his courage, and how would you recommend I take care of our little pest problem? The elder's head bowed. It'll be a matter of gaining the upper hand. Additionally, the cards were on the way. By now Obito knows that you've defected from him. When Nagato heard the abrupt statement, he looked up and blinked. From the window of his tall tower, a silent flash of lightning emphasized Naruto's silhouette. You're back. Naruto approached Nagato and his equipment and said, Yeah. A few minutes ago, had a talk with Akio then came here. He looked worriedly at the clicking mass, his arms crossed in a serious expression. He'll be coming here. Obito will. Nagato moved to make himself more relaxed, something the blonde seemed to lack in relation to the man in the mask. "You'll be gone by then, isn't that so?" he asked. Naruto gave a headshake. "It's not me I'm worried about. He may look for me here, but he'll also confront you." At the summit, Naruto had made it apparent that he was with Nagato. In addition, Nagato had previously taken him to the Rain Village against Obito's will. Obito's plans for them had been defied by that action alone. Nagato grinned somberly. "Do not underestimate the true Akatsuki, boy. He cannot do anything to me, or Conan." Once more, Naruto shook his head. He was all too familiar with the statement, "and you don't underestimate what he'll do when push comes to shove." He's different from before. There's an even deeper darkness in him, and even in our own village. Knowing that he had just returned from Konoha, Rinnegan's eyes were fixed on him. "Are you referring to Danzo? Did you speak with him as well?" "Not this time. But before, yeah." His eyebrows shot up in skepticism. "And how did that go?" The teenager merely grinned. Naruto stretched his arms and his back and quickly put away the last of his supplies in a sealing scroll. He yawned in satisfaction, stooped to pack the scrolls into his backpack, and picked up the potted aloe vera plant from the table, holding it in one arm while he carried his food bag in the other. If Karen were to seal his preferred meals with the others she had gathered for the trip, she would have to do it herself. He couldn't understand why she hated instant ramen so much. A giddy Suigetsu greeted him outside the room and slapped him on the back. Along with his sword, which occupied his entire backside, he also carried a messenger bag that hung from his shoulder. "You're back. Ready to go?" Huh. He forced Suigetsu to grab his food bag by shoving it into his chest. "And here, take these to Karen." Suigetsu groaned and peered at the contents of the bag. "Wah? This is just instant ramen. Dude, when ya gonna learn you have an unhealthy obsession with this stuff?" Naruto sneered. "Okay, miss. Yogurt. Hey, at least it's real foe." "No, it's not." Naruto saw Conan coming down the stairs and was hurrying forward before Suigetsu could respond. Naruto saw her and ran, almost colliding with her in his haste. He gasped and caught himself with the rail. "Hey Conan," he said. With the other arm, he held his potted plant in front of him. "Can you watch my plant for me? Don't let it die while I'm gone, okay?" His love for watering and taking care of plants too frequently had to take a backseat, which was the one drawback of being a ninja. Short missions were acceptable. He would save some of his pots and return home. However, lengthy missions? Man, he was glad he didn't have any animal companions. It was bad enough to see plants rotting and kissing the dust. After initially giving him a perplexed look, she sighed and accepted the plant. "Very well." And he laughed, "Thanks." He leaned in and whispered, "And you know who wrote that icky, gushy drivel?" He waved his arms at the response, saying, "Jiraiya. Sensei. I gave the first to my sensei as a gift and Yuki ended up dying because he didn't think to put his porn down and water the poor thing, so I'd hate to lose the second." In response, she laughed softly but agreeably. The side of him that was devoted to peace was truly his best attribute. She chuckled softly as Naruto flashed his teeth in a face-splitting grin, remembering how much of a kid he was at heart. When she looked at the plant in her hand and saw a thick leaf that had been broken off, her smile vanished. There was a brief pause as Naruto also caught sight of her. She said in a low voice, "It won't remove it, you do realize that, don't you?" With a frown, Naruto gripped the stairway rail with his fingers. "Yes," he said in a whisper. With a nod, the woman abruptly shifted the topic. "You saw the Hyuga just now, didn't you? Was there any new developments from her side?" Naruto rubbed his chin. "The transition is strange." "Nah, not really. Why? Why would she be interested in the affairs between him and Hinata?" With a contented smile, Conan urged him to go without responding. "Go, child. The sooner you depart, the better." "All right, Sound. Here we come." His teammates groaned in response to Naruto's raucous declaration. The Sound was only the beginning of his crusade, which would prove to be their longest and most complex mission ever. Even though they were just getting farther away from the city and the tall towers were disappearing from view, Naruto's enthusiasm and energy were way too high. Karen hissed in annoyance and pushed her glasses up. "You do realize it'll take like 3 days until we actually get there?" "Yeah," reprimanded Suigetsu. "Conserve some of that energy, why don't you?" Naruto gave him a tongue out. "You're just grouchy because of all the weight you're carrying." Even Naruto was well aware of Suigetsu's infamous travel habits by this point. The frequent complaints and the necessity of taking a break to either drink from one of the many bottles he always carried with him or rest his body from carrying so much weight. After a few minutes, they would need to pause once more to allow him to urinate. Do the cycle 100 times over. However, given how unusual his body was, Naruto couldn't blame him for needing to drink so much. Suigetsu's fixation on useless swords, however, didn't help either. Naruto had always been the kind of person who wanted to finish missions as soon as possible. How else could he become Hokage and win people over? In fact, he thought, Suigetsu's skills made him an indispensable Taka member. Really, they all were. No less would have been acceptable to Sasuke. He wouldn't have wanted anyone else for their task except those of Team Kakashi. Suigetsu responded, "Just wait until Kisame comes for Ya and I get his sword as well, deadpan. Not to mention the other 5. I'll cut Ya down a peg or 2. Without even glancing back, Sasuke yelled, "All of you shut up," from in front of them. "If you have time to babble, you're not focused on running." Naruto gave an eye roll. Like Sasuke. Fortunately, the scenery had changed from long, level grasslands to verdant forests that they could safely jump through, shielded by the cool foliage shadows, even though the day was getting hot. It was ideal, Naruto thought, that they had arrived at the edge of the land of fire. Sasuke was also quite familiar with the terrain. They were moving along nicely and had not yet encountered any. In the corner of his eye, a white line flashed. A Zetsu farther ahead, down below. As he watched it fly across the landscape, Naruto flinched back, thinking about Zetsu's potential to spread and inform Obito as well as his concern for the rain. It wasn't good that they were already scouting this far. In any case, what on earth was that thing? Then Sasuke appeared, leaping through the air, his body twisting as his arms suddenly swung a huge shuriken, before Naruto could think to reach for it and hurl a kunai at it. Amaterasu. It was too late for the oddity to notice them racing in the canopy of branches above, and by then the fire-lit weapon had already hit its target squarely. The strange creature let out a cry and was swallowed up by the dark fire. The Taka waited, sitting in the leaves, until the fires ate up all of the Zetsu. And it did, consuming it in its entirety until not even ash remained. Suigetsu gave Sasuke the thumbs up, but Naruto was only able to frown. He had the opportunity to remove it. However, Sasuke possessed the most practical ninjutsu, was extremely quick, had perfect aim and speed, and most importantly, where the heck did Ya pull that huge shuriken from? Sasuke simply dismissed him abruptly and rushed forward. Naruto reluctantly did the same, forcing himself to keep up in order to avoid having to look at the Uchiha's back. He cared, even though the other members of the team might not have. He thought about that and grinned. Sasuke and him. Once more, they were competitors. He was going to beat him to the enemy the next time. "You're just trying to brag." Naruto sneered at his inner beast. Kurama laughed. "What's wrong with that? You'll probably do the same thing as soon as the other tailed beasts are released." "I definitely wouldn't, boy." Despite the looks he received for it, Naruto simply laughed aloud. They kept up a hard, steady pace until the moon was high in the sky, at which point Karen called a location where they could set up camp. It was a hilltop clear patch. They could see for a great distance from there, but the trees would keep others from seeing them. "It seems clear," she remarked, glancing around. Focusing, she lifted both fingers and closed her eyes. A minute later, she was at ease once more. "I don't sense any chakra outside our own." Sasuke gave a nod of approval. They had plenty of lighting because the moon was full and the sky was clear. They were well positioned to detect any threats well in advance thanks to this element and Karen's senses. Even without sensory abilities, any member could keep watch all night long because their camp was situated on an elevated patch of land. "Set camp, eat, and get some sleep," advises Sasuke. He had forced them to run non-stop for nearly a whole day with very few breaks. He would acknowledge that. And accept accountability for it. "I'll take watch." "You sure? Shouldn't we take turns? Rest?" Following meals, the members found themselves in sleeping bags, lying around in a circle near their travel packs, snoring, and their stomachs full from the long run. Sasuke sat with his back to a tree trunk, rubbing a wetting stone along the edge of his blade, close enough to be able to monitor the distance from his vantage point. He listened quietly to their snores while pushing the stone to the blade in nearly unison. There was a sound that was neither snoring nor the sound of animals. Motion. Human. He stopped wetting abruptly. Sharingan. Even in the darkness of the night, the deep red glowed brightly, and the hidden movement within them became evident. He sighed as the Sharingan deactivated. He would probably be up. A fool. He went over to him. As though training, the blonde was punching the air in complete silence, with nothing but the air to hit. Naruto punched it, concentrating only on his solitary, silent training. To get his attention, Sasuke jabbed at his shoulder. "It's too late. We got a long day tomorrow." Naruto turned to face him and said, "Su?" He positioned himself and swung at the air once more, curling his fingers and extending his palm outward. You need to rest. It was another swing, already did. Thus, he had trouble falling asleep. Despite rubbing his temple, Sasuke chose to ignore it. Naruto's failure to go to bed would be solely his fault if he caused them to slow down the next day. He was about to walk away when his shoulder was grabbed by fingers. Hey, Sasuke. HN? How did you pull out that large shuriken earlier? He moaned in his head, even though he was aware of Naruto's lack of intelligence. A seal obviously was his adamant response, but there was no scroll. Tenten does the exact same stuff, but she has to carry a bunch of scrolls on her, so what kind of seal? Pulling his arm up, Sasuke started to remove the outermost layer of clothing. The seal is marked onto the band around my arm, he clarified. He held up the now exposed band to demonstrate his point. It bore a circle of markings with the word blade in the middle. As though it were the most amazing thing he had ever seen, Naruto stared at it. Since Sasuke had learned the technique from Orochimaru, Naruto would not have been aware of it. Neat. That's extremely convenient. Does it work like a summoning? Yes. It's called Kachiyose. Raiko Kenka. Naruto hesitated for a second. A look of skepticism came over his face. Would you teach it to me? I mean, it would be a great way to store scrolls as well, and we already know I'm able to summon. Sasuke responded with a nod, though one that was irritated, I guess. His hand reached out for Naruto's arm, but before he could get it, Naruto leapt back. I want it on my actual arm instead of a band or sleeve so the enemy won't be able to tamper with it. Is that possible? Yes, he replied, his hand still outstretched, as if he was waiting for them to finish. And if I have it directly on my skin, would it still be removable? Sasuke gave him a blink. What? The permanent seals I already have are enough, you know. So should the day come when we're in a time of peace, I want to be able to get rid of it. Not exactly a tattoo kind of person, you know. Sasuke barely paid attention to what had just been said as he rolled his eyes. The badgering from Naruto only made me more irritated. Should you feel the need to deactivate it, I suppose you could easily. Okay then. Sasuke attempted to plant the seal on his arm once more, but the Uzumaki abruptly jerked it back in a panic. Not there. What is it? Sasuke yelled impatiently, his voice barely under control. I'm right. Handed, declared Naruto. Shouldn't it be the left wrist then? Pulling the sleeve up, Sasuke grabbed the other arm and forced himself to exhale slowly and calmly. Palm up, he ran his fingers down the wrist. Just one arm? Two would be utilizing it to its proper capacity. Just left, he said definitively. You're a waste. Naruto tensed as he watched the black markings that were webbed across the area with only a few words. Sasuke thought, he's acting funny, but it was over after a split second. Raising his wrist, Naruto gazed at the ring of odd symbols that matched Sasuke's. Although Karen was correct about him, it is not appropriate to question him about it at this time. He's simply too preoccupied all the time. The voice said, summoning, lightning flash blade creation, Naruto. Now to train with it. Sasuke smirked and thought, at least he wastes no time. Naruto would not be going to bed now, though. The Uchiha sighed in realization of this. How about you take the watch for tonight? No sense in both of us staying up. Naruto replied, sure thing, while already holding a scroll over the seal. The parchment vanished in a poof as he closed his eyes and concentrated on the technique. He grinned as he inhaled deeply. Perfect. That's one less scroll I have to carry. Sasuke turned and walked away. He was stopped when a hand caught his shoulder. He snarled, stop touching me. Naruto merely chuckled. Thank you, Sasuke. Really, thank you. I merely taught you a convenience so you would be less of a burden on me. Just be quiet and practice. Naruto smiled doubtfully. If you say so, HN. Naruto looked at him and trembled. Sasuke raised his dark brow. What is it? Naruto smiled. I just realized that this is the first time we're truly working together as a team since Team 7. Sasuke gave a bored shrug. You're too sentimental. And you're a butthole. Naruto rolled onto his back and stretched himself in the grass, yawning. He was the only one awake at this point, and even Sasuke was content to sleep. Naruto was too exhausted to train, and since he had committed to watch duty, he was unable to do anything but stare at the stars with the intention of memorizing and studying them. Unfortunately, the familiar constellations here quickly became monotonous. He shifted, a little uncomfortable. It was very quiet, almost by nature, though this might have been caused by the complete absence of any breeze or wind. Without it, the air was stagnant, or it would have been if it weren't for the night's coolness. If Hinata is feeling better, I wonder. Swish. He sat up, breath catching in his throat, fingers hovering over his new seal as something moved, and then there was a rustle of leaves. Then let out a sigh as an owl emerged from the foliage, gliding off in style. I'm still so jittery, geez. Taking a deep breath in the misty air, he relaxed again and briefly closed his eyes. Kurama's tensed from within, almost leaping out of its supine position. Naruto. The air that you are inhaling is. He only suddenly fell into a deep, deep sleep without hearing the others. He gasped as he woke up. Without even opening his eyes, he knew one thing at once. He was sleepy. Like when you're groggy from a drug. Do you have a headache? Verify. Confusion. Verify again. Crap, crap, crap. That owl. Just further north, the white owl wasn't even native to those areas. How could he have been careless? In addition to. When they fly, they don't make noise. Kurama reprimanded. Sound frequencies are absorbed by their feathers. Naruto, the enemy, was what you had heard. That was an error that even a young genin would not have made, and as a result, their gas rendered you all totally exposed, and you were taken prisoner. Kurama, quit, I was exhausted, you know? He spat back. Was Sasuke going to give it to him, man? In his mind, he could already hear the reprimands and ranting that were about to happen. He knew he could handle the consequences, so forget about the fact that he had let his guard down. Sasuke, though, he was going to get ticked, man. He scanned his surroundings to determine his location. And I can't help it, I'm not familiar with that type of owl. Seriously, where am I anyway? He said as he was doing it. He was lying on cold concrete, sprawled out. Concrete that is extremely cold. He was surrounded by 3 of its walls and a row of bars for the 4th. What? Was he confined? Was he in Konoha again? Where had Sasuke and the group gone? His hands started to rise for his face, but were stopped by a cold, hard metal presence. He was restrained by chakra suppressors and handcuffs. Ones that caused his arms to ache. At the time, this wasn't a dream, and based on Kurama's indication, it wasn't a genjutsu either. Oh no. He was already in this position before he had even arrived at the sound, which was the first step on their map. Not at all what was intended. What the fu, Obito? There was a long silence followed by a gentle sigh. The sigh was tired, but that was to be expected. There would be no return to the previous state of affairs. A gloved hand grabbed the mask and took it off. Half of the face that was visible was scarred. Scars that showed how little they actually knew about the man they had been following so closely for years. Things that had long been hidden from them. Conan spat, getting tense. You were never Madara, he said. Just a liar. Like a bolt of lightning, the word bounced off the chilly walls. Uttered in a typically apathetic voice, but with anger. Untruthful. Obito scowled. He had become such a trivial thing as a result of Naruto's remarks. Yes, I am not Madara but a Uchiha who bears his mantle. I am the one who will carry on his will to save this damned world. Who I am does not matter, rather it's who and what I represent, and that is peace. And I will achieve it. Conan's stern eyes remained unwavering, more solid than rock. But he was, too. Obito turned to face Nagato and said, What I do for peace. We've come this far together and I see no need for the Akatsuki to break now. I thought we were on the same page, Nagato. Nagato gave a weary shake of his head, as had I. If it's a problem of communication we can get it sorted out. No we can't. He hadn't looked at Obito until he said, Our business together is done. The Akatsuki is no longer yours. The Kyuubi is no longer a requirement to peace, nor my Geto. The expression was as firm and determined as Conan's. Previously, Obito had anticipated that she would be the only one wearing it around him and that Nagato would maintain a somewhat detached gaze on the ground or the sky. But no, his decision to split from him at this time was very clear. After all of this time, all of their sacrifices, and all of their labor. Obito gave a gloomy laugh. I'm going to pretend you hadn't just said that. Each individual had a weakness. Their main point. He was also aware of Nagato's. His little whispers got to you, haven't they? Are you really so dense that you would actually accept his babbles over the truth you have learned over the years? Conan stiffened. You mean your truth. Right from the very beginning you've been trouble, but no more. He was unable to believe what he heard, a frustrated chuckle. He looked into Nagato's eyes and said sharply, You are confident now, but what happens when someone slits the kid's throat? Naruto is the next Yahiko. How can you so easily follow a child's sweet whispers of peace when you've learned the harsh reality of doing so? He asked. Nagato could only stare down, his eyes narrowing at the memory, while Conan winced from the side. Obito was well aware of the anguish of losing a best friend and comrade, as well as the burden of holding their lifeless body. You couldn't return to that location or become the joyful person you once were. Only a harsh shift. He will die the same death, and there is nothing short of the real Madara's plans that can save this world. Face it, Nagato. We need each other to stick to our plan, or nothing will change, and neither of us can afford to bank on the kid's idealism, no matter how sweet it sounds. With his eyes closed, Nagato quickly shut his mouth after opening it to speak. There was nothing to show for the idealism he had once believed in, and he was powerless to alter the reality that it had crippled him. Dead was his friend, his temporary mentor. You will surrender such idiotic notions, Nagato. You must. He was getting closer to Nagato with every word, seeing him shrivel up from inside his shell of doubts. You know what the inevitable outcome is. Do not let hope blind you. You can spare yourself the trouble that you know is inevitable. And if it's an attachment problem you have gotten, I will give him a quick end rather than the long painful one he would have otherwise endured. After the chaos he had created with Nagato, Obito would actually give Naruto anything but a speedy demise. Before releasing him, he intended to ensure that he endured genjutsu torture for at least a lifetime. Nagato's Rinnegan was encased in his Sharingan. Now tell me, Nagato, so I can remedy this before it gets out of hand. Where is he? A cold prison, gas to subdue an enemy, and white owls. The person who had taken them was not your typical adversary. They were decent and, to be honest, had been smart not to try to start a quarrel with them. In other words, they didn't undervalue them. Naturally wary, Naruto swung himself into a sitting position and scowled. Since there was no bed of any kind, he was going to assume that the visit would be brief. All right, he said. He only needed 10 seconds to access his new seal using the Kyuubi's chakra and create a simple needle, a lockpicker, from it that had already been planted, and voila, he was no longer in handcuffs. As he arrived at the bars, he bent forward and attempted to catch a glimpse of the hallway. From what he could see, it was fairly long, lined with numerous cells similar to the one he was in, and flanked by men wearing odd armor. He even recognized Suigetsu snoring from the person next to him, and he saw a few bodies in some of them. He grinned. Most likely, the other Taka were also in the area. Still, why were they housed in such unsanitary prison cells? When he called out to the guard nearby, he was not heard. He rolled his eyes and sat down to try to make sense of it, keeping his hands behind his back in case a guard happened to pass. Before he ran out, he wanted to think things through. He discovered that failing to do so always made matters worse, so it was recon. A rogue like Obito most certainly did not capture him. If he had been, he could only speculate about the situation and condition he would have woken up in. Who, then, might have done it? How could anyone have gotten to them so quickly? Were they from up north? Hold on a second. Now he remembered the owl that was indigenous to the snowy regions and the odd armor. Ah! He exclaimed, reveling in his genius and unable to control his voice. I think I know who done it. Well, no dip. Karen came to his cell with a frown on her face, and he almost jumped when he heard her voice. The guard behind her had fallen to the ground. Hey! Howda! Her pick, which was thicker than his and shaped to loosen the tumblers in a large lock similar to the one on his cell door, was raised. Oh! What gave it away, the fact the now unconscious guard has that armor, or the fact we were nearing the land of iron and you completely neglected to factor them in? She said, gritting her teeth as she started working on the lock. Recalling the circle he had drawn on their map, he countered, they're like extinct, though. In fact, he hadn't even considered the land of iron. Not long ago, it was a place that was so far removed from his consciousness that it could have easily been a different planet. How was I supposed to know they would come up? I mean, seriously, they're samurai? She let out a loud sigh. This is why this isn't going to work. A bit too angrily, he interrupted, don't say that. His eyes widened as he took a deep breath. Seriously, I don't want you or anyone else to even think that. I mean, I just screwed up, okay? I'll be more careful from now on. You just can't expect me to know every little thing that's going to come at us. I thought I did, you know, Obito, Kabuto, Zetsu, root members, so forgive me for getting one little possibility. I mean, they're samurai. I'm sorry, but think about it, Naruto. Just because they distance themselves from the shinobi world, doesn't mean they're not going to be a problem. They're warriors in their own right. Besides, even the cage acknowledged them. Why do you think the summit was held here? Ah, 'cause they're neutral. Idiot, ninja are better. Says the one who let his guard down and got captured. Yeah, totally better. He was about to say, hey, I'm still getting the hang of this, when suddenly a presence approached them. Huh. Once more, Naruto almost jumped when Suigetsu appeared out of nowhere. Geez, he wheezed. I keep forgetting you're made of water. Suigetsu's lips curled into a snarl as his teeth flashed in a cocky smile. They took my sword. Karen shot back, they took all our stuff, and finished with the lock. The door of his cell swung open with a screech. Suigetsu produced a growling like sound from his throat. My sword. Do you not realize how She spat out, oh shut up, fish head, we'll get it back, but we need to get out of the prison block first. Finally get to cut loose. Suigetsu's momentary elation at the idea was dashed by Naruto's single glance. Suigetsu scowled and muttered, maybe here, but not in the sound. No needless confrontations and no killing. That won't help our position at all, only make things worse, and that's the last thing we need now. Karen gazed at him for a moment before her gaze fell to the ground and remained there while her lips formed a hard line. Suigetsu gave her a shrug. When it came to making vengeance his only motivation, he differed from Sasuke. No, but the men who had taken him and given him to Orochimaru still owed them retribution. Their trip to the Sound and the people who squandered years of his life was the only aspect of this journey that excited him more than the possibility of confronting Kisame in public. Indeed, he had gotten off lucky compared to many of Orochimaru's other inmates, spending the majority of his time in a tank and not being dissected alive but still alive. Too long. Naruto could afford to spare the samurai, but he would not tolerate the black marketeers. Not even Sasuke had done that once. Suigetsu said, all right, while knuckling boredly. But see if we get there without running into a samurai, and I doubt they're gonna just let us waltz by. Hey swirls, get a move on. Naruto kept sitting in the lotus position in the cell until his eyes started to turn orange. When he arrived at the state, he got up. What is it? Inquired Suigetsu. I don't sense him. Karen let out a weary sigh. You do realize I'm a sensory, right? I already knew he wasn't here and could have told you that. When Naruto opened his eyes, the shape of the irises was even stranger, and the orbs were an odd yellow. Like a frog, Suigetsu thought. How long have you known? Karen briefly displayed signs of pain, but she quickly recovered and turned back to face them. She started down the hallway, saying, I don't know. As they waited for the remainder of her response, the boys could only fall behind her. I just know that he left before we woke up. You was awake, wasn't you? It was not a question, and she grimaced at the veiled accusation in Naruto's voice, which was aimed at Sasuke rather than at her. No, he just was too impatient and knew I'd interfere with him taking guards out. No, Naruto. It wasn't like that, but he was here. Yes, but not anymore, please just stop. As he had predicted, they came to a group of guards who were not easily roused. And there's some unconscious guards up ahead. Specifically, one was still writhing, his eyes glassy. He was breathing rapidly, and two watery streaks revealed their stories after the helmet was taken off. With a sigh, Naruto struck the man on the back of the neck after spiking his chakra. It was La La Land, untouched by the horrors of genjutsu. Another guard was struggling to breathe next to him, a hand covering a bloody wound that had been slashed between his armor. Naruto got to work right away, taking off his armor to bandage the wound. With suspicion, Suigetsu questioned, what are you doing? Naruto tore a lengthy piece of cloth from the man's shirt bottom and pressed it against the sword wound, saying, our fight is not with them. With a relieved look on his face, he sighed wearily as the man passed into unconsciousness. But Sasuke was definitely here. When Suigetsu realized the truth, his eyes widened. So he left us. Oh, that's lovely. Karen interrupted, her optimism not quite coming through. No doubt as a test, she said. He was probably studying how his team would handle a capture, but it was still possible. He left us, said Suigetsu again. Nothing screams team leader more. Silence up. Naruto scowled. In any case, I marked my bow so I can warp to it. It'll be in the armory with the rest of our stuff. He grabbed their hands. Come on, we can skip a lot of guards this way. As he said, they were in the armory a second later. Fortunately, he had his sage mode on and the distance had been short, or else he would have experienced the negative effects of his teleportation jutsu. There appeared to be thousands of weapons and armor stored on the rows of shelves that lined the armory. The Taka's equipment shone from the farthest corner, which held the non-samurai equipment. Sasuke's pieces were the only ones lacking. Along with his belongings, he had come here to get the money bag Konan had given them for their money. Suigetsu said, now get us out of here, after they had completed extracting everything they owned. When he attempted to take one of the samurai's blades, Karen had struck him. His gaze was expectant as he tightened the strap binding Zabuza's enormous sword. Naruto let out a sigh. I can only go to spots I've marked. So unless you want to go to Konoha or the rain now, we continue on foot, after finding Sasuke. Suigetsu let out a moan. endlessly roaming the samurai's castle halls. It is then. Betcha they're flanking the entire place. Karen gave a grudging nod. They are, but they're not moving. And, they clearly know we're here, right here, but aren't doing anything. Well, not the ones in the castle. I sense that there are others outside the castle, probably trying to hunt down Sasuke. Naruto put his hand on the doorknob after completing the retrieval of his final sheath. Then they're expecting us. I say we find the leader and talk it out before a fight breaks out between Sasuke and the chasers that result in casualties, in which case their leader will surely take this even further. Unlike Sasuke, we'll resolve things here first before leaving, clean it up. And no matter what, he was going to clean it up. However, it seems that others shared his desire for that. As they started to wander the corridors, he began to feel something. They were silent, long, and cold. A bit too silent. He knew something was wrong when they passed a guard and the woman did nothing. Feels trappish. What? Naruto gave a headshake. I mean, it feels like we're going where they want us to. Karen moved her pack almost deliberately. I'm getting the same vibe. Suigetsu gestured forward. Look, that light. The corridor ended when it merged into a huge foyer. He could see a kneeling figure inside a door that had been opened at the far end of it. The fox laughed from inside Naruto. You are anticipated. Taking a deep breath, Naruto stepped inside, not surprised to see Mifune, the samurai's head, sitting there anticipatorily, drinking from a porcelain cup. A guard behind them shut the door behind them. The man put his cup down on the table after finishing his drink and turned to face the team. He spoke to them, his face solemn as he gazed into his round eyes, which were marked with numerous lines. We must talk, ninja, and should I find you a threat I will execute you without hesitancy for the stability of this world. Guards stood around the room, their weapons ready and waiting for the call. This man was serious. A single misstep and... Suigetsu flinched, ready to strike, but Naruto raised his hand. Stand down. He nodded to the elderly man, ignoring Suigetsu's irate face. I'll comply. We'll talk. On one condition, your men chasing after Sasuke stand down as well. There needn't be any bloodshed today. After staring at him, the man turned to look at one of his guards. How many guards did he kill to get here? None. With a contemplative hum, he gestured for Naruto to sit down. Very well, we'll talk. Naruto sat down on his knees in front of the little table. His hands remained on the surface. Mifune gave a nod of approval before his face took on a severe expression. Your team members and supplies and weapons will remain in my custody until we reach a verdict. Should you try to escape before we come to a conclusion, we'll act accordingly. Wait, hissed Suigetsu. What? No way. Sway, Naruto said in a firm tone. This isn't Akatsuki's or the freaking sound. Just go with them. This talk shouldn't be long. As the two were grudgingly marched out, he continued to watch Mifune. Mifune placed his hands on the table with their fingers interlocked after taking a quick sip from a porcelain cup of tea. Do you know why you are here? Honestly, I have no clue. Mifune laughed. As he went on, his round eyes became serious. I appreciate your honesty. I suspected your first move would be to cut the greatest evil down and one who happens to be a common enemy to most, that being the man we now know as Obito and Orochimaru's underling. This would mean an excursion to the Sound. Therefore we anticipated when you would be close enough to apprehend the easiest. Naruto stiffened. This man knew where they were going, and if he did, others would soon follow suit. Back then, they had little time. The samurai simply happened to be the closest to take action first. Nevertheless, he had just described Kabuto as a shared adversary. Why even stop him? This wasn't justified by anything Naruto had done to Mifune. Not that he could immediately come up with. Although he did crash the summit party, he did so in order to expose truths. But why me? I had you captured because you were either the biggest threat to this world or its salvation. You see, boy, as a samurai I have watched from this cold perch as the ninja have long abused their chakra. So easily they use it to overpower those without it or they act before words, cutting their enemies down. They've grown arrogant and have lost honor. But, you. As Mifune took a sheet of paper out of his folder, Naruto moved. When you made your little scene at the summit a few days ago, you did so under your own authority, the Biju and the rain I believe. Let's see, the words were, to the cage of all nations and all those who'd threaten peace or seek to gain the Biju as their own. You seriously had that documented, word for word? Was the first thing Naruto said aloud before he fell to the ground. Mifune looks up at him with round eyes. Do you not even realize the scope of your own acts? Naruto looked at the ground. In any case, you have the capacity to throw your kind into even greater turmoil. But I believe you've inherited convictions that many shinobi have lost. As the tension in the air subsided, Naruto experienced a wave of relief. You see, boy, already your reputation, even though you were quite young, precedes you. The son of the fourth Hokage, the Kyuubi host, and friend of the Kazekage. Pupil of a legend who even I have respect for. Jiraiya. Yes, we samurai are here to keep watch over the tides your kind makes, to intervene when needed. And many times Jiraiya was there, acting nobly. There is a rumor that Jiraiya took in orphans for a time to a nation he wasn't even from. That is not something a vain ninja would take upon himself. Too often children and civilians are forced to suffer from battles that wreak havoc to the land in their scale because of the many wars ninja have waged against each other. Naruto gave a nod. Trust me, I understand that and I want to break that cycle, and he wanted to, too. These are the convictions your ninja system needs. This is why I believe you could be the exact catalyst the shinobi need. But we must look at the facts and see the threats for what they are. You are joined to a man who is the embodiment of exactly what's wrong with your ninja world. You mean Nagato. Pain. But yes, the very leader of the Akatsuki. The Akatsuki is what's wrong with the ninja. Honorless curs, and you will not find one samurai, even Ronin, among their ranks. Naruto leaned back and inhaled deeply. It's a long story, trust me on that, but all you need to know now is that he is a victim who has since seen the errors of his ways. I would trust him with my life now. Which is something I couldn't say a few months back. Mifune's gaze strayed to his blade. It is hard for me to trust this from someone who is still just budding. You have not experienced history, and history warns us to be cautious. History never changes. Pain will be your downfall, if not your Uchiha partner. Nagato raised his head and took a deep breath. My answer is this. Idealism it may be, but I will not allow you to harm the boy more than you already have, Obito. He is the only chance left, not the Akatsuki, not the ghetto, but the bonds he's managed to weave to those he meets. It is those connections that will spread to form a bridge to peace. And it is this bridge I and Conan and this village will protect. Now leave. You are no longer a part of us. Nagato, you need to rethink whose side you're on. You may think you're on his side, but you've long strayed from the light. You've committed acts from which there can be no atonement for them, and so have no one to rely on but yourself, an overly ambitious boy with delusions of grandeur and a destroyed city. I may be outnumbered here, but outside, my influence is endless. My army innumerable. Nagato's lips pursed into what appeared to be a smirk as his face tensed. You're right there, but you overestimate yourself. Pray explain. How old were you when Madara broke you? Just a mere child, a heartbroken one who never grew up right after being stunted so. Naruto may still be a child in many ways, but he's far outgrown you. And also, unlike you, he has people behind him to back him. He will continue to warm the coldest hearts and be a bridge for others to follow, while you will alienate others and only find yourself dying alone. From her partner's side, Conan shone, pleased by his newfound conviction. She said, your reign over the Akatsuki is over, with a smooth voice. Obito's anger was clearly boiling over. Madara's calm, collected exterior had vanished. You two are the ones alone. The boy has turned the cage and his own village against him, and me. I still have the remaining members on my side. And as long as you have that little wretch here, running around with my Kyuubi, I will hunt for him. I believe I found a device the rest of the remaining Akatsuki members, can use to contain it until the ghetto is ready to seal it. And I will find him. I'll have my Zetsu's counterparts tear through this city until he is found. There was no question that he meant his threat, he was in a desperate situation. Paper swirled from Conan's arms as she shifted into an offensive stance, encircling the room. You will not touch our city, believe it. My spies are everywhere as well. You need me just as much as I need you, Nagato. And trust me, I'm not going to let anything get in the way of peace. I'll take you by force if I have to. Obito slammed his fist into the wall while tearing the paper in his arms. With a hand raised in preparation for an attack, a pain jumped forward. Obito growled, his eyes blazing with passion and his hands dancing into motion. Obito was forced to back into the wall when a figure ran from behind and a plume of fire suddenly filled the area where he was standing. Who starts a fight in such a small room? With a short blade pointing toward Obito, the hooded figure stood defensively in front of Nagato and Conan. Take it outside. Or better yet, get out of here like they told you to. With a gasp, Obito took in the form with his Sharingan. Itachi. No. Your chakra. You're a Uchiha. He appeared as though he was truly shocked, but that's impossible. The man grinned. From what I know, your shell of an existence should be an impossibility too. Gosh, now you know how everyone else felt meeting you. Obito, irritated by the man's cheerful tone, demanded, who are you? He was only a blood Uchiha. Conan grinned. You are outnumbered, Obito. TCH, this encounter will not change my plans. You will see me again, and when you do, it'll be your last time. After he vanished and his aura had completely vanished, Shisui let out a breath he had been suppressing without realizing it. He turned to Conan and grinned pityingly. Phew. I don't think he knows about me yet. Element of surprise. That's good. Too many times the strength of Uchiha is gauged solely by their ocular prowess. So I think it's best he's kept ignorant of my, condition. She took his hand and held it in her warm palm. Thank you. We avoided an unnecessary fight for today. It was a winnable one certainly, but this city must be kept in consideration. And by all means, you see more than he does. She let go with a sigh. To think we were like that. Shisui agreed and hummed. Still, that guy is gonna have to be dealt with. If he comes back I can fight him, but I don't think I could spare his life, he's... As she looked out the window, watching the rain, Conan's voice suddenly sounded solemn. Naruto must be the one. That man is the trigger to so many of the trials he's had to and continues to face. It is his fight. We can only urge him to keep him on the right path and support him. And she would keep him on the correct course. Even if it meant keeping him unaware of the distractions that come with marriage. She frowned as she turned to face Nagato. I pray he achieves his quest. I know he will, but still. They had just put all of their money on him. There was no way out of this situation. What sort of society would Naruto's child grow up in? Naruto inhaled deeply as he returned to the land of iron. He was prepared to respond to Mifune. History may not change, human nature. I've already seen it, but people do change, said Naruto. And he has. And I won't abandon that hope, else I'll just fall into the darkness like Obito did. And I refuse to. Uzumaki, how is it you are able to sit here, with absolute trust in people who've tried to kill you in the past? How can you even guarantee this path you're taking, against your beloved village, against the current Hokage which you desire to become, will not end in foolery? Because I have to. A protracted silence ensued. And the fact the Uchiha would leave you behind as he has so colorfully shown today? Naruto's mind returned to the Rain Village, to the first time he had returned. He had initially visited Akio at the prison rather than Nagato. A man who attempted to kill him out of grief, and after everything was said and done, he only felt sorry for him. As Naruto inserted the key into the lock on his cell door and started to twist at it, the man shifted back, his face bewildered. When Naruto entered and took a seat across from him, he appeared even more perplexed. I'm going to find out everything I can about Konoha's attack and speak to the man responsible. After blinking several times, Akio shook his head. It's meaningless. It may not change the past, but it'll affect the future. Do you understand? That is my answer. To make sure such an act is never condoned again. Then he grabbed a small key and reached for the Akio's shackles. I'm leaving the rain today. But you'll see me again. And whether or not you try to kill me, well, that's up to you. But I won't sit down and take it. For now. The chains parted. You're a free man. The man rubbed his aching wrists and laughed darkly. Think you're immune to what the smaller people feel just because you're a shinobi? The day is going to come when that faith you got is going to shrivel up. When someone you care about is going to die in your arms and it's your fault. Come back to me after that comes to pass and show me how confident you are then about your path. Look me in the eyes and show me that resolve. After that, he departed, his rage almost visible, and it was painful. Feeling helpless, Naruto shook his head and left. He had not, however, allowed it to shake his conviction. He was unable to. Now, as the memory faded, Naruto blinked. Akio wasn't the first to intentionally spit at his plans. It had been physical the first time. When he attempted to stop Sasuke at the last valley, he simply lay there and spat in his face. Go, 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 Sasuke. His friends and many others in his village had long considered him a hopeless case. Naruto, however, was wiser. He remained silent for a while. Then he grinned. Does it count when you yourself planned this, knowing the outcome ahead of time? Mifune laughed. You're smarter than you act. But even as a test, the outcome was still yours to come to. His. And he's proven my point. You would be wise to leave such a person behind if you wish to keep your intentions noble. You overestimate something, though, a huge factor. And what was that? How vital bonds are to me, and how I will never give them up. He appeared to get up and go. Only the general's hand kept the men from tensing up and grabbing their weapons. I don't know about you, samurai, but what makes true shinobi who they are is the fact they endure. They have to. Although the words sounded like a smile, they came from an expression of indifference. I'm happy. Namikaze. Yeah? I'm satisfied with your answer. Naruto nodded and grinned. I will let you continue your quest without the interference of the samurai as long as you do not stray from the position you hold now. You're an honorable warrior. Thank you, Naruto nodded, but he turned around right away. Oh yeah, call off your men hunting Sasuke down. He goes with me still. Mifune nodded grudgingly despite the loud sigh. For now, Sasuke had used the alias, Raijin, to book a room at the closest inn. When they finally located the right room, Naruto's rage was beginning to show. With a nervous smile on his lips, Suigetsu backed away from him as he knocked on the door. Karen took a tentative look around. Quietly, she stated, it was just a test, it had to be, to see how we would handle the situation. With a pale hand on the handle, Naruto knocked more loudly until the door opened. Sasuke, shirtless and a little wet, peered out from the frame. He had a towel dangling over his shoulder. That was faster than I expected. He gestured for them to come in, but Naruto remained motionless. He crossed his arms instead. He impatiently tapped his foot against the floor. Talk. Now. Dressed first. They met on the roof of the inn. Frowns of various intensities were exchanged there. Naruto said, answer me this, first. Say complications had arisen with that Mifune guy. Would you have actually left us? If you couldn't get yourself out, he grimly replied, then you're not fit for this journey and will only prove to be baggage. He flung up his hands and exclaimed, I knew it. I seriously knew it. Listen, Sasuke, people aren't made to be flawless machines and sometimes things happen. You don't just abandon your team like that. I mean, seriously, you don't even know how to be part of team right, do you? No, you're so focused on your goals that you treat the people close to you like expendable things rather than people, and it's so grating and, Done. Naruto lowered his voice and sat down on the chilly tiles, saying, no, I mean, you were once vulnerable too, weren't you? Excuse me. I thought about it a lot, the time after you brought Itachi down, to the time you joined the Akatsuki. I could never wrap my mind on that drastic shift. Until I thought about Obito and his tactics. He talked to you after your battle with Itachi. But the funny thing is, you don't let people just talk to you, certainly not deter you from your path, but then you lost yours, and so he must have had to do what Kakashi did then, tie you up just to force you to sit there and lee. He dodged just in time to avoid being struck in the head by a flying fist. His expression was one of mock shock. See what I mean? You're just as human as the rest of us. He said. Who could have known? He exclaimed, his silly expression falling away as his face lines gathered in anger once more. And wanna know something? While you sat there, taking his crap in, your team could have left you, but they didn't. Sasuke. Even now, they're still here, well, except Jugo. He's out there fighting his demons for this team, but none of that matters to a butthole like you. Seriously, you need to stop viewing people as mere things and let someone in, at least one person. Sasuke frowned. Naruto was not done, though. Just one person, alright. Preferably a shrink. A fist swung forward once more, striking him in the face this time. In retaliation, Naruto kicked Sasuke, slamming his foot hard into his shin. Sasuke staggered back and briefly grimaced as he straightened out. His fingers twitched as if he wanted to try to hit him again, but he stayed motionless for a brief moment. Done? Asks Naruto mockingly. TCH. Calling behind his back, Sasuke turned and left, saying, we leave in 5, get to the Sound Village by nighttime and camp outside the outskirts. He had a slight limp. Naruto rubbed his cheek and grinned. He returned to the room, ignoring the amused looks from Suigetsu. He had the back of his head in his hands and was stretched out on the couch with his elbows pointing outward. The door to the bathroom, where Karen was showering, was beside the couch. Sasuke had yet to return. Just think, tomorrow we're gonna be there, and I can't wait. Naruto remarked, you seem overly anxious. Suigetsu smiled. I have my own plans. Besides, as bad as it is, it's like a jungle there. Meaning lots of shade and water. Yeah, replied Naruto. You guys keep talking like it's some kind of hell, but it can't be all that bad. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Naruto scurried to the wooden table in the middle of the inn room, but Suigetsu grimaced and almost stepped on him. A couple of times he knocked. What was that for? Inquired Naruto. I don't want your bad luck, you jinx. When the two men sat down at the bartender looked at a couple of his regulars in surprise and said, you two sure have been gone a long time. The stools were used to the point where their rears were practically etched into them. He had always taken pride in having the friendliest bar, even though it wasn't the best in the Sound Village, let alone Land of Sound. There were no last calls, and the customers were devoted. He truly loved the people in his job. In particular, these two had not appeared in a long time, but they practically lived here. gave him reason to worry. In the village, disappearances were frequent, but not for shinobi of their level. They weren't disposable genin, they were chunin. One young man named Akira said, "Been months I'd say," in response. He had a nice build but was a shorter man. Green eyes and fair hair. Daichi, his friend, nodded and put down a menu. His features and hair were dark, and he was a member of an ancient clan. He was usually the more somber of the two, but for some reason tonight he seemed a bit more so. 3 to be precise, and, Shiger, I'll have the usual. Oh. The younger one said abruptly. With a humiliated laugh, Akira looked to the side and bit his lip. That's right, it was Shiger. I mean Shiger, I want the usual too, you know. There was a long silence. For Kami's sake, let him do the talking. Daichi glanced at the slightly agitated Akira for a moment, then boredly turned back to the counter. Been a long journey home, could use a meal as well. Extra rice. The land of rice fields was the previous name for the land of sound. The prices were reasonable, and there were plenty of rice dishes and sake. It was Daichi's favorite dish as well. Except when he ordered extra, he was simply not Daichi. After saying, "All right," Shiger moved across the counter. Taking a pair of glasses, he gave the order to a cook behind the camera. "What took you guys so long anyway? I almost thought you were dead." Daichi stated, "It was just one of those missions, out-of-state kind of things." Shiger blew a whistle. "For so long? Must have been important. May I ask where?" Akira responded, "I dunno if we're allowed to say," to him this time. "It's kinda top secret." "Say you have to go to the bathroom. Now." Daichi got up abruptly. His hand went to his younger friend's arm and he said, "Excuse us for a moment. I forgot that we were supposed to turn our mission report in as soon as we got back home. Food can wait." Before the bartender could reply, the two men had already departed. He shrugged his shoulders after giving his head a weary rub. He and the patrons were not present when Daichi slugged Akira outside. However, a child hadn't. He was a young boy covered in dirt, one eye covered by an eye patch. He paused to stare in fascination at what appeared to be the start of a row, but a woman who was equally filthy soon pulled him along. "No, no," she said in a whisper. "You don't want that trouble, causes missings." "Moom." His voice trailed off, and then an irate one took its place. Shivering, Sasuke yelled, "What did I tell you about your speech?" Rubbing his cheek, Naruto stood up again. "What do you mean? I was playing along, then you two freak out. Seriously, what did I do?" Karen hissed angrily from the radio earpiece, just as she had done to them in the bar. "It's your rhetoric, stupid. Your speech patterns." Akira doesn't slur and especially doesn't rely on informal contractions. Unable to resist the urge to put his finger to his ear with the radio, Naruto yelled, "Like what?" Compared to the ones he had used in Konoha. The ones Karen had given the two boys were smaller and lacked obvious mouthpieces. He was afraid that if he hit it hard enough at the right angle, a small wad of metal would easily fall out. Sasuke practically glared in frustration as he rubbed his temple. "You're gonna for one thing," he yelled to her. "I dunno, and sort of, and particularly your compulsive use of, you know, or similar phrases. Obtain. Rid. Of course, them." Naruto, who had never heard Sasuke use so many casual words, let alone all at once, couldn't help but laugh despite the anger directed at him. Between chuckles, he apologized, saying, "But I can't help it, it's just the way I talk. Okay. Is it really that bad if a few people get in?" "Yes," she said angrily, "they're going to realize that you're not a chunin by the name of Akira if you don't stop talking like a teenager. You will now need to locate another location for information gathering. If we want to move forward, we must determine what happened to the daimyo." "We're done here for tonight, Kei," said Sasuke, shaking his head. "We must reorganize." By regrouping, he meant to join the other Taka outside the village, where they had been all day and had just begun to make good progress, at least in terms of surveying the castle and fields from the outside, but not so much about the daimyo's whereabouts. "Really? We just got here," Naruto complained. "Now?" "His name's Akito." A black dot and white photograph was positioned in the middle of the table the group was assembling around. The Taka had regrouped outside the village that Orochimaru had established. It was simple to enter the village, but it was preferable to stay far away from it in order to discuss their plans, let alone be gathered together without arousing suspicions. For this reason, they had briefly stayed in a budget motel outside the village in a nearby city. A tourist would be put at a certain discomfort when surrounded by too many cold people, who frequently wore a mix of traditional and military attire, and they would quickly discover that the Sound Village was not a place to visit for its rice or music, but rather for its power. Hungry unit. The security was suspiciously low, almost welcoming, as if they wanted you to enter. A man was to blame for this. The one in the picture. The man sitting in the picture was a heavy dot-set man with thick facial hair and dark hair. He was the only one who had created the sound and brought Orochimaru to prominence. He had allowed the devil in for power and money, and now he was gone. Next to the photo, Karen placed her notes about the man. I asked around as well. Suigetsu muttered, "You mean hoard around," and Karen skillfully nudged him. I didn't have to use that. This guy is very popular. It was strange to see this man, this lean freckled thing, and know that it was Sasuke. What do you mean? It had taken a long time to get it locked up, chakra levels and all, and Naruto suspected neither of the two would deactivate the heavy jutsu until the mission was over. Sasuke raised a brow. Even though they were back outside the village, he hadn't let his transformation drop. I mean, this guy has turned into a fascinating ghost, Karen said, tucking a strand of hair nervously behind her ear. Since Orochimaru's passing, no one has seen him. However, no foreign officials have looked into it. There was also no word of his passing. He is no longer visible. Naruto had been there before, but there was no death and no investigation. Murmuring, or hostage, Naruto said. Everyone looked at him. Consider it, he said. The fatty is a significant man. A political object. Naruto's expression briefly darkened before fading as he went on, saying, someone took his place and is holding him prisoner. He can still be used if necessary, such as for official documents that need his signature, as long as he is alive. The captor still has authority because of his seal, which prevents anyone from asking too many questions. After muttering, that is likely, Sasuke looked at Suigetsu. Suigetsu. What do you now know about the people in charge? Half of the old guys are dead, he joked. We got some new guys according to the local shinobi and farmers. He put down his own bundle of notes, which, in contrast to Karen's, were barely more than a scrawl, and the paper was wrinkled, as though it had been wet and dried in that manner. The head drug lord, for instance. We have a new man. Not a new guy, but a young one who managed to get his top rival out of the way. A man by the name of Sachihiro. Do you recall that shocking revelation about his girls Natsuko? Maintaining their straightness and rocking the rings. They're in order, and by straight, I mean the rings, not the guys. And by rings. You mean traffickings like drugs and knock-offs? Naruto licked his lips nervously. You're so adorable, Suigetsu said, laughing aloud. No, I mean both humans and that. An entire underground market. Even though Orochimaru is no longer there, they still occasionally send people to Kabuto, as well as other villages. The fact that he would and could pull a dead guy out at random sickened Naruto, who felt his fist tighten and a frown appear on his face as he recalled how Yamato Kabuto had attempted to trick them on the retrieval mission by posing as Sai with a fake corpse. Orochimaru was dead. Why couldn't he just find his own path and leave them alone? Why is he still taking people? Suigetsu gave a shrug. Sasuke, Orochimaru's primary subordinate, said, consider it. He might have picked up reanimation from him. Live sacrifices are necessary for that. Shuddering, Naruto said, reanimation? Like bringing back the Hokage? Yes. And he's doing it by using live people. Giving them up, they just let him do that. But why? This city has the ability to cripple him, but they do nothing, he demanded. Calm down Naruto, Karen said. That's why we need to find the daimyo and have the sound village brought back down. Anyway, Suigetsu went on, I'm going to assume Noritaka's still head as the head of the, he said, making a quote-unquote symbol with his fingers. Noritaka, said Sasuke again, almost with affection. Who is that? And what do you mean by science division? Inquired Naruto. Main Inn. Village location for testing out prohibited methods. Oh, the prison of the sound. In any case, that's its front. As I mentioned, it acts as an unclean laboratory for undesirables. At least the ones that, incidentally, I was one of and weren't good enough to have attracted Orochimaru's direct attention. But who can tell what happened after Sasuke shut them down? Who is its current main officer? Noritaka never handles the inmates directly, Sasuke inquired. Naruto leaned closer, feeling that there was some history here, and he heard something in his voice, the way he had said it, concern? You're going to love this, Suigetsu said with an almost insane smile. I hear Tatsuya. With a sigh, Sasuke said, it's fitting. Who is that? No one. All right. Naruto glanced again at the notes Suigetsu and Karen had collected on their targets. Don't tell me. So the dirtbags most likely to know anything and who need to be dealt with. He was abruptly interrupted by Sasuke, who said, Suigetsu will handle the rings, Sachihiro and Natsuko. He is unable to spend the night in the village, unlike us. However, we will be in the apartment of Daichi and Akira. We'll continue looking for the daimyo there, We will be able to handle the science division once we have him. We don't currently have the power. What about Karen? Naruto inquired. I'll remain on the outskirts with Suigetsu and stay on the lookout for the return of the real Daichi and Akira. Who? Look, unlike me and Suigetsu, you're borrowing their identities because I know their chakra enough to match yours to theirs and because they're not around, Naruto said, and Karen rolled her eyes. We cannot wait a long time for 4 or even 2 strangers to appear at the same time. And I'll let you two know if we're not finished when they get back from their trip, mission, or whatever. You would have to retreat right away. Sasuke's tone became almost menacing as he looked icily at Naruto and said, we cannot expose ourselves here. Do you understand? The mission cannot end if any of us are exposed. Naruto didn't have to ask why, because all 3 of them had a history with Orochimaru, a guardhead who could heal others by consuming her chakra, a student of his, and a prisoner. The Taka could all be captured and treated as traitors, but he wasn't just an outsider, he was the host of one of the greatest tailed beasts, and he was also a political tool, a Jinchuriki, as he had stated to the group regarding the Sound's daimyo. Swear to me, Sasuke replied, that no matter what, you will not for any reason drop the identity as Daichi for as long as we are here. Of course, I swear. Sasuke went on, you won't alter your chakra levels either, or they won't correspond with his levels anymore. Do you get the idea? This implies that you will also keep the Kyubis dammed up. Yes. I will not take any action that could raise suspicions. No one had enjoyed damming up the Kyubi's chakra to cloak him, but it had been worth it because even a sensory wouldn't be able to identify him from its chakra. Good. Now study up on Akira and Daichi again, Sasuke said, tossing a large file that had been on the side of the table at him. They must be more familiar to you than you were to yourself. They were merely one of Orochimaru's soldiers, which didn't mean much in the Sound when the majority of the people had formed close bonds with him and came together for him. Sasuke, who, in contrast to Karen, had actually met the close friends once, had assembled the file. Naruto grumbled, took the file, and tossed it in his backpack. Study again? He asked. I already did, but obviously it wasn't good enough. Sasuke said, we head to their apartment in 30, and then he went to get his own pack. Naruto would have to urinate now rather than later because the trip would take an hour without any stops. Naruto made his way to the restroom, opened the door, entered, took a quick glance, and then left, shutting the door behind him. He went over to Suigetsu, who was sitting off to the side, fidgeting with the baseball cap Karen had made him wear even outside the village. He looked like a normal Joe, with his dark brown contacts and filed teeth hidden by fake dentures, and his hair scooped up into it to conceal his bright locks so you could actually see his entire face for once. However, he was not your average man. He muttered, "What, little Akira?" as he saw Naruto staring at him. He said, "Suigetsu, what's that naked man tied up in the tub for?" After giving Naruto a sly smile, Suigetsu shrugged his shoulders too naively and asked, "Where do you think I got my information?" After giving him a disbelieving look, Naruto turned around and headed back to the bathroom, presumably brandishing a knife to cut the ropes. Suigetsu swore, leapt from the couch, and ran in front of Naruto, blocking the door. "He's mine." Naruto concluded that Suigetsu had turned the faucet to threaten him because the man was lying in what appeared to be a damp tub, whimpering in fear from the gag, and twisting at the hogtie. "Dude!" Trying to shove him aside, Naruto screamed, "We don't take prisoners, now return the man to his original location." Naruto was more irate than Suigetsu had anticipated, as evidenced by the vein that was almost visible on his forehead. The struggle was brief, not particularly forceful, but in an irritated insistence. Suigetsu glared just as vehemently before he sighed and threw up his hands. "All right. I'll return him." After a brief period of time with his eyes narrowed, Naruto relaxed his posture. "Good. He leaves before we return." "Done." Suigetsu concealed a smile. Friggin' predictable. He wouldn't just let this man waltz free, of course, not because the scumbags still knew things about the Sound that they needed to know. No, this was purely personal. This was a man he was going to kill. When Naruto turned away, Suigetsu turned to give the man a gloat-filled grin. Why? Because he was the lightning bolt that had ruined everything. Suigetsu nodded in agreement before settling down on the tub's edge to consider his next course of action. Naruto and Sasuke would soon depart for the Sound Village once more, and neither would be present to obstruct their plans. Not that Sasuke would, but only because the man he was meant to kill wasn't in the Sound, where he should have been. Yes, the Sound. Suigetsu had not been here for a very long time, and he felt a sense of nostalgia when he passed through the Sound today. It was like brand new money, and this feeling had remained constant as he approached the border. In the land of Sound, Nature was abundant but trampled underfoot by ninja sandals. Suigetsu whistled as he surveyed what was essentially the village's vestibule and its center core, where there was a bustle of activity among its residents and patrons, farmers and military interacting together, some in shadow. The buildings were mostly traditional houses and business establishments, with a traditional rice mill to the right, a short distance away, made of wood, stone, and concrete, in contrast to the miles of rice fields the Taka had traveled to get here. Taking a deep breath, Suigetsu vanished in the crowd, momentarily over, aware from fear of being recognized. His fear was offset by reassurance as he recalled how Karen had assisted in creating a convincing disguise, and that his had been much easier to conjure than tampering with Naruto and Sasuke's chakra, which had left her exhausted, enough so that she would visit the village later than all of them. Unlike him, those two had characteristics no disguise could conceal, and that he had exhausted her more than he had Sasuke in particular. Suigetsu recalled prodding at the then tired Karen. He really shouldn't have. Get to put your hands all over Sasuke, huh? Have you found his nuts yet? Shut up. She went to Naruto for the final step, the Kyuubi's chakra, after their awkward silence with Sasuke and Suigetsu. He could still see Karen, with her hand pressed to Naruto's stomach, perspiring, as he tried to reassure her that the legendary Kyuubi and he were now best friends and that its chakra wouldn't harm her. After it, hear Naruto yelling, "I want a jacket," and her equally outraged response, "It contradicts their dress code." The closest he came to his desired sleeves was some linen wrapped around his forearms as she threw a military patterned vest at him. Suigetsu chuckled at the idea of seeing Naruto dressed like a villain, but he stopped when he realized he had attracted the attention of a passerby who was strolling through the streets. "Hey," he said to the man, who was somewhat overweight and wearing traditional clothing. Since there was no band with the sound symbol anywhere, Suigetsu could presume he could speak to the man. Likely a pedestrian, not one of the ninjas who had taken up residence at the sound because they were power-hungry. The man paused. "I'm new here," he said. Suigetsu held up a map for effect as he said, "I came for work and sake, but first I was looking to, get some." He was gazed at by the man. "Oh no, I asked the wrong guy. The town's east side. The Rei Onsen is something I suggest." "Never mind." This man was good. A good pervert. Suigetsu thanked him, then turned and started to go east. He hoped a certain lowlife did, too. Onsen, clearly a front, a little on the nose, but who in the higher echelons of the ladder really cared? They must have gone there. Suigetsu said, as they returned to their inn-room outside of Sound Village. His captive fell silent, and a drop of sweat trickled down the side of his face, either from a tear or sweat. "Part of me expected to find you in the bathhouse, sitting there in your naked pettiness." He tilted his head, removed his hat, and shook his head to get his white hair to fall back to its normal style. The man watched rigidly. The captive spit out, "I don't know what your deal is, but you're going to release me now." "You're in no position to make demands, buddy," Suigetsu said, his hand threateningly wrapped around the knob as his lips cracked into a smile. "This is really my preference." A blade flashed, and the man grimaced. "But," he said, dropping his hand and reaching to the side of the tube instead. "You're crazy." "Am I crazy? I have a question for you, friend. Are you even aware of my identity?" He didn't, judging by the expression on his face. This was merely a random attack. Suigetsu's grip tightened as something darkened in his stomach. "You don't even remember me, do you? I went to some trouble to find you." He had returned to the sound, which he should have stayed away from like the plague. As the sounds of the sound swept through him, the recognizable screams, the laughter, Suigetsu smiled, his smile feral. It was a mess that was near the blood-soaked land where he had grown up. Time for some fun. Suigetsu eventually located the inn near the bathhouse and springs. Inside, lights glistened from the gold decor, and the seats were made of rich crimson velvet. It was a beautiful place with ugly intentions, and he was greeted by a gaudily dressed woman named Natsuko, whom he knew by name because she had once tried to seduce him with the intention of breeding. It was Orochimaru's idea, and Suigetsu had obviously not bidden. Suigetsu had to hold his breath from all the perfume that radiated from her, fearing that he would choke on it, or worse, taste it. She was a beautiful but conceited woman who made Karen appear insignificant. Yick. He slipped some cash across the counter. "A night would be nice for me. That's all. I think I have a special one for you," said Natsuko, grinning as she leaned on the counter and gave him a measuring look, presumably reading for his type. "Oh, despite your diminutive size, I can tell you're a fighter. Not as large or old as some of our other customers. I'll give you our most treasured one, yes." Nodding, Suigetsu said, "All right." Taking out a clipboard, Natsuko said, That one is still new. Oh. It'll cost more. Refusing to frown, Suigetsu took an extra wad from his pocket. The room was opulent and had cost a fortune. He muttered to himself, maybe I should have taken a different route with this, as he looked at some of the mounted paintings that showed numerous naked gods, but those thoughts quickly vanished when he saw his purchase. A large man brought her in, and after giving Suigetsu a toothy smile, he quickly left. Enjoy. Suigetsu's skin tingled at the smile, but it was brief as the escort departed. Natsuko had assumed the poor thing was at least adolescent when he had said, new, but instead he saw a pathetic youngster wearing heavy makeup and geisha clothing. He muttered, irritated, just lovely, this won't do. She stood with her face pointing to the ground, her shoulders trembling. Kneeling before her, Suigetsu said, hey, kiddo. Wincing, she closed her eyes. Observing red marks around her wrists, he scowled and said softly, I got some clothes here. He had retrieved a basic t-shirt and pair of sweatpants from a laundry pile outside one of the rooms, and he said, they might be big, but they're better than that crap you've got now. Don't you get dressed in them? After giving him a doubtful look and giving him a shy nod, she grabbed her dress and started to undo the sash. Before she could remove her clothing, he jerked around and said, get dressed in the bathroom, he cried out. He added, leaning against the wall with his arms folded while he waited outside, and wash that crap off your face. A hesitant and perplexed, okay, slipped out. Suigetsu closed his eyes and shook his head until she knocked on the door to let him know she was finished. She shuffled nervously to the bed and sat down after emerging in the covering clothes. This better? Anything else? She inquired in a broken voice. Suigetsu burst out laughing and said, I'm taking you out of here, kiddo, not to bed. Hurry up. Incredulous, she gazed at him. What? He grinned as he glanced down at her. I just wanted to ask some questions to a local. Figured I could do some good on the side. Why? Why are you here? With a sigh, Suigetsu looked out the window and said, because I understand what it's like to be someone's bitch. Crap, I mean dog. You can say bitch, she said with a smile. They constantly refer to me by that name. He threw a hat on her head after taking a deep breath, even though something inside of him twisted. Well, you're my kid now. She was younger than he wanted, but she knew many of the answers. After all, whores were the eyes that saw the world at its most honest. She just happened to know that and more. It just cost him all the money he had. They arrived at a local restaurant, which was quiet and almost deserted. Perfect. He started asking the questions Sasuke expected him to find the answers to. Suigetsu, you can't do this. She had been assigned to stay here, unlike Naruto and Sasuke, and here she was. He had sensed her lingering but had assumed she wouldn't interfere, and she hadn't earlier when they had met up. Her voice almost made him jump. She was wearing a short black dress, her hair styled up, and large hoops hanging from her ears, though she still had to wear long sleeves to cover her scars. He had run into Karen in the same restaurant where he had taken the girl, though he had to rub his eyes several times to make sure what he was seeing was correct. What on earth went wrong with you? Suigetsu snorted out of his chair. Beet red, her face said, I'm working, fool. From next to her teammate in the booth, a tiny voice said, she must be new, I don't recognize her. The tiny frame caused Karen's eyes to narrow. Fisherhead, who is that boy? This is my kid I adopted earlier today, Suigetsu said with a smile. Karen gave him a disinterested look. Okay, he said, I'm going to borrow her for the time being. I asked her a few questions because, well, we're tourists. Suigetsu then told her about his certain friend he suspected had his hair cut because it got yanked a few times while under captivity, but their circumstances had been very different. The girl, Usagi, had actually wanted to cut her hair short, and she said they pulled it all the time, so she didn't care if hacking it all off made her look male. Karen's expression changed entirely. You mean? Karen bit her lip and sat down next to the girl after Suigetsu nodded. Do you have a family you could go to? My mommy left me, and my dad is dead, Usagi said, looking down. I now reside at the brothel. Karen's expression changed to one of pure sympathy as Usagi shook her head. I've been by myself for a while. Are your grandparents present? Usagi nodded. Surprisingly, she lives outside the city. Although I am aware of the address, I am unsure of how to get there. However, Big Brother said that if I told him about my pimps, he would assist me in getting there. With a feeble smile, Karen said, that was awful nice of him. Usagi looked to her savior and smiled broadly before returning to her plate, which she was still devouring as if there were no tomorrow. And about the lightning user. I think I've seen someone by the description you gave me, she said, swallowing a mouthful. Karen's eyebrows shot up at this. Lightning user? Usagi gave a nod. He doesn't go to the onsen. but I always see him across the street, at the Coliseum. Suigetsu's expression darkened. That ring, huh? The ninja duke it out there, indeed. We get a lot of business from it across the street, and I'm not fond of them at all. The fighters are the worst. After giving her explanation, Karen grinned grimly and turned to face Suigetsu. Well, brother, what are you trying to find? A lightning user? Are you trying to find someone to spar with? Yeah. Something like that. Karen was too familiar with him, more so than either Naruto or Sasuke could ever be. Suigetsu detested the fact that she had accompanied him to the Coliseum, the way she looked when he took center stage and emerged victorious, the lightning user, and the fact that she had revealed who he was to Suigetsu. Sway, she said as she stepped into the restroom, you can't. He sarcastically declared, I'm not doing my job, after hearing Naruto babble about the mission inside. He is too knowledgeable. He definitely has to go now. He laughed. Whoops, I just said his name. You're lying, she said. This is about you venting. He gave her a scowl. She would most likely start playing Shrink to try to talk him out of it. Suigetsu told her that this was because this guy was a jerk, not because of Orochimaru, and she saw right through it. This isn't about him, she stated. His mind raced back in time, in vivid detail, but in crystal clear detail. Praise erupted, the excitement palpable. He was cool, self-assured, and triumphant. He was making a name for himself, as he had intended. The first time he saw the dark eyes, he was outside a training field, and he would never forget the way the beast's snake-like eyes looked at him with a smile. He said, that match was quite spectacular, his voice more like a snake's hiss. If a voice could release poison, Suigetsu could sense it in a single word, and he had him like the coil of a predator's tail, without even noticing that the matchgoers had dispersed. Tell me, are you of the Hizuka clan? There are rumors that you are the demon's second coming. I am a Hizuka, the last one around, Suigetsu said, smiling at the compliment rather than flinching. Suigetsu is the name. My name is Orochimaru, and I'm delighted I just happened upon you, he said, his lips curling into a brilliant smile. You see, I need someone to work for me and handle a specific task. Suigetsu shrugged him off, understanding the gist. I'm a solo guy, okay. I am my own boss. You'll need to find another person. Okay? He immediately left. To put it mildly, Orochimaru was not pleased with his response. However, Suigetsu shouldn't have been surprised when a lightning-style user approached him later that night. The funny thing is that he could hear Mangetsu in his head, calm as usual, telling him to stop dancing around in pointless fights. You fight for your goal, and this was just pointless, so he should leave. However, he hadn't because of pride, which told him he could take on anyone. He was the demon's second coming. Who was this guy? Some sound grunt. He would regret it for the rest of his life, but he could still clearly recall the aftermath of that battle, from the agonizing flashes of white to the cackles of joy from a large man who was as self-assured as he was proficient in his jutsu. Before it consumed him, the last thing he remembered was lightning. Suigetsu gasped as he jolted to consciousness, feeling stripped of both his clothes and his equipment, which would not have been too bad if he hadn't also been strapped to a table like a lab rat. When he was further awakened, he tried to get out of his cold bed, but his limbs were stopped short. Panic burst through him like a bomb as he took in his position. Whoa! He began struggling against the straps around his limbs and chest until his muscles strained. After what seemed like an hour of fighting, during which he cursed like a sailor, a menacing aura filled the room, and he caught a glimpse of a dark, sickly figure with a pale, undeath, dark hair, cruel measuring eyes, Orochimaru, or the snake. Gritting his teeth, Suigetsu said, Listen, sicko, I told you no. Now, immediately undo the straps. Orochimaru withdrew a syringe, his expression displaying a lack of interest. He recalled saying something witty next, but it vanished after he glanced at his captor and the snake sticking out of his sleeve. His voice sounded pleased and on the edge of madness. You will not speak to me in such a tone again, understand? Before attempting to liquefy himself, Suigetsu gave the straps one final yank. His chakra felt gunked up, but that didn't stop him from leaving this place. Fangs sank into him, and Suigetsu grimaced as the venom spread through his body, causing his body to tremble and feel heavy. Sweat beaded his forehead, and all he could think about was fear and helplessness. A needle was inserted. It would be the first of many before Orochimaru's next amazing pet was added. Then he was imprisoned in a tank. He was rarely released, and when he was, it was usually under the close supervision of Orochimaru. He was once led into a large room and made to fight a man named Jugo, who was similar to him in that he was a freak of nature and would have definitely died if Suigetsu hadn't had his abilities. It wasn't until later that he learned the name of the strange powers the berserker possessed. In addition to Jugo, he had met Karen, who had occasionally protected him and assessed his health in the tank. Then there was Sasuke, Orochimaru's most cherished and specialized pet, who was young like Suigetsu but was merely a trophy. A clan child who had kept the snake content and out of Suigetsu's sight for years. However, the research never stopped. Experiments continued, becoming periodic for Suigetsu and daily for others until they died. During his time in the tank, Suigetsu witnessed a lot of inmates and freaks come and go, the majority of whom were left to die after having their bodies disfigured for his study. The fact that he would eventually leave this place, a fact they couldn't take away from him, made Suigetsu feel fortunate. He only needed to wait for someone to reach Orochimaru, and eventually Sasuke did. After days of encouraging Karen for fun, Taka happened. Naruto was a fun partner, but he was too tender. But that didn't change the fact that everything in his life had gone wrong. It was all the lightning user's fault. Karen sat next to him and said, "You claim that he was to blame for everything, but why were you in that ring in the first place?" Suigetsu gazed down at his own image in the water. "You were lost before you were even captured," she muttered. Suigetsu froze at what she said, and there was a long silence. At last, he gave her a furious look. He growled, "He dies," he said. "This is impossible." Karen's objections were ignored. As he struggled against the hogtie, the man let out moans. Something in Karen just sank when she saw the pathetic scene. "I used to be your jailer as well. Are you going to murder me as well?" Shortly, Suigetsu said, "You're different." She yelled, "Oh yeah, how so?" After a moment of hesitation, Suigetsu pulled out a knife, swung it in the air, and pointed it at her. "You were just doing your job," he said. He was having a good time. He is merely a scumbag. He won't even be remembered." "Suigetsu," she said slowly, "this won't take back those years." He appeared different, on the edge of tears, and she was afraid to watch him go through it. "I am aware of that. Okay, I don't think about getting even all the time, but you know what, Karen? I'm not Sasuke. I'm not Naruto, either. I'm not some Konoha Boy Scout. One of the mist swordsmen is me. Alright, I cut people down. I'm going to cut down the person who squandered so much of my time because that's what I do." "Gosh. This isn't about that," she cried, stamping her foot. "You are aware that it isn't. For once, just acknowledge it and deal with it like a real person." When he slammed the knife down, the man spasmed for a few seconds before going limp, and Suigetsu watched as his shoulders and smile fell. That was it. Completed. With his bangs covering his face, Suigetsu lowered his head and, without a word, turned on the faucet to rinse the blood away. It was a long moment before he spoke, and when he did, his voice was filled with regret. "I'll never know who took him away. I loved him and I can't even do that. I couldn't save him." His shoulders trembled slightly as he fell to his knees and sat on his legs, facing the victim and the tub. Karen took his hand and knelt next to him, unable to speak. "It comes so quickly. I never want to be on the other end again," he said, finally glancing at her. "Additionally, Kabuto still has him. I don't think I can put him on the receiving end of the sword again, but he can call him at any time. He was the only family I had, so he's not some target or dirtbag. The problem with losing your only family is that it makes you more vulnerable than ever." Naturally, Suigetsu would not admit this. He had fled from the mist after his brother was killed and his sword stolen, telling the group that he had left because he was no longer bound by anything there, not with his brother, but he knew the truth in his heart and could recall every detail. "You can't trust them. You can't trust them." The grass was sharp against his feet as he ran, his heart pounding, his breath rushing. His skin was already cold with death as he lay there in a pool of water and blood. "Brother?" The younger Suigetsu could only imagine the seven themselves killing his brother, and since he was able to use all 7 of the special blades, they had killed him, one of their own members. Fear. Suigetsu began running without even stopping to pack. He had everything he needed on him, including a sword on his hip, a wad of ryo in his pocket, and clothes on his back, since no one was left alive to say goodbye to. In fact, the only person deserving of a farewell was lying on the ground, robbed of both his sword and his life. He would not stop running until he was far from the mist, which would make him a rogue, but he didn't seem to care. He went on, slicing through the ninja who were patrolling the mist's borders, his heart thumping as he did so, their blood splattering into the air and then raining into the sea, misting it. Then, as he caught his breath, he fell and saw the water grow darker. Now that he was on the receiving end of the sword, and his brother had been dealt a fate that he and Suigetsu had dealt out so many times without consideration or care, life was beginning to feel so much more fragile than he had ever stopped to consider. His arms encircled himself as he rocked slightly. What would he do? Where would he go? Suigetsu looked into the water at his reflection, which was shrewd, the similarities he had with his brother. His vision became blurry, and he wiped his eyes while inhaling sharply. What was wrong with him? He inhaled deeply, got up, and began to walk while zoning out to his thoughts. Mangetsu and he had attempted to join the Seven. It was essentially their destiny to become one of its members. In fact, Mangetsu had, and Suigetsu was meant to join when one of the members met their end. However, those hopes had faded, and the Hazuka clan was now the Seven's target. Suigetsu halted his journey, the flesh between his brows furrowed. He was aware of his new course. The Hazuka clan would attack the Seven, and he would seize their swords and assume leadership in their place. It would take time, but he vowed to seize every single blade, as well as the lives of their owners. First, the man who killed his brother and took his blade. But he would have to get stronger, fight, and make his name known, so he did just that, recklessly. His inflated ego drove him to seek fights, tearing people apart with his skills and preventing him from being beaten to death when he got into a fight with someone higher up. He soon gained the attention he so desperately wanted. And didn't. He was afraid of this because his life had changed and he would never get it back. "I'll do it for you," she said in a low voice. He gave a low snicker. "You?" "Yes. You haven't seen the few tricks I still have up my sleeve." A gentle smile lifted his spirits a little. "Hey, Sway," she said in a whisper. "What? I'll get rid of the body for you." He looked at her and nearly burst out laughing, but instead he smiled. "Lo. Go ahead and leave. Take down the actual targets." He inhaled deeply and said, "I enjoy being a simple swordsman, correct?" Sasuke and Naruto search for the daimyo's location but discover that his heavily fortified fortress, like castle, has been taken over and is now the headquarters of the Sound Village. Recon starts. Suigetsu wants to stay on guard outside while they do it. They find out who the heads of each division are and why they must be brought down, but they are all locked inside the castle's outer walls, where the people of higher status reside, and they will have to become operatives to get to them instead of just walking around as citizens in disguise. They also get to see the lower two underbosses in business in the field, the drugs and abuse the man gives out, and the savagery of the money head. Naruto wants to take them down, but they have to wait for time. In addition to giving them ones and matching their chakra, Karen promises to stay outside so she can better sense the real ones, who are probably on a mission, and defeat them if they try to return to the village. Suigetsu is tasked with locating and eliminating Sachihiro from the farming division and Itsuko from the business division. Naruto had assumed they would be the worst, but he is shocked to learn that Naoko is merely a young girl being used by the Sound on lies and feels trapped. Her brother can only give in out of love for his younger sister, and he hates it all the while. Naruto and Sasuke will want access to the head of research, but they are unaware that what they suspect is some kabuto. Like Siko is actually a young prodigy Naoko with her firm elder brother Taichi. They are unable to enter the castle any deeper without raising suspicions. This is irrelevant when Tatsuya sees them. It turns out that he killed the two they are posing as, so they are no longer there. When they later arrive at their apartment, Sound military forces attack them. "I'm telling ya, this is some mistake." Naruto threw up his hands. "I'm a freaking citizen of the Sound," he moaned as he felt his hands pushed together behind his back after being pushed face first into the wall. "My space is being invaded by you." There were slams and crashes as they started to tear up the room, and his face turned completely white. These guys were serious. This wasn't a random search. Rather, there was a real reason to be suspicious, including the radio in his ear, which the man holding him against the wall picked up and held out for the other men to see. Ah crap. He was only aware of the stench of dirt as a black bag was flung over his head and the agony of a boot hitting the back of his legs. He is strapped to a table and awakens for a moment, but Naoko is hovering over him, siphoning his chakra and reporting to a shadow out of his line of sight that his amounts are abnormally outstanding. She continues to take some of his DNA after the man leaves, and by then he is awake enough to speak groggily to her, telling her that she doesn't have to do this and that she can stop and run right now. She shakes her head, her eyes full of fear, and she says, "I'm so sorry." Another shot is given, and he passes out. They had estimated that the operation might take a few days, but when Suigetsu finished on his end and checked in with Karen, he discovered that something must have gone wrong because Naruto and Sasuke were still gone. Their radios were dangerously quiet, and their chakra was in too still a state. When Naruto awakens, he and Sasuke are both in a dungeon, and just as he is about to release Kurama's chakra from the chakra suppressors that are holding them, a completely calm and unconcerned Sasuke warns him that if they comply, they may be taken to the headman they have been trying to reach for days, and that they should not stop their transformation under any circumstances. He also warns him that they will be treated like spies and tortured for information, something he is familiar with from his previous visits here while running errands for Orochimaru. Sasuke and Naruto even share a fleeting moment together, but not before Sasuke overreacts to a guard's remark about Naruto's arm, implying that the spy is either interested in self-mutilation or has a fascinating past. His wrists ached as he moved. It was hot. After a period of silence during which Naruto struggled to catch his breath, he titled his head to Sasuke, his voice quiet from the strain. "Well, how long have you been here?" "A few hours." "What? How did you convince them to quit so soon?" With a grin that was almost delightfully amused, Sasuke said, "I don't have your mouth." "Yes, absolutely, whatever. It's really hot, and it's likely that you just passed out or something." Control of temperature. Heat to cause annoyance and ultimately separation from the other person. Assisted by inadequate sleep, malnutrition, and medical. "Stop talking please." Time crawled, and they stood in silence. Leaning his head back, Naruto let out a long sigh and said, "Hey, Raiden, how does it play?" "Wait for an opportune moment, but whatever you do, shake Sasuke." "Yes, I am aware. Despite the fact that they are obviously aware that we are not from, well, you know. Right here. They don't know that." Sasuke said, "This isn't your first time under questioning," and shifted slightly. "Nah, first time was a couple of weeks ago," Naruto said, leaning his head back. "When you went back to Konoha." He had most likely nodded, and it was silent. "This is different, though," he sighed, because Ibiki adopts a physiological perspective. It's clear that these guys are about pain. Not to mention that we're being punished for being spies. Which are we? Rather than for failing to report a certain, jerk. "No, hi, Sasuke, HNH, if we ever get out of this." "Shut up." For a long time, there was only the faint clink of metal, and then it arrived. "You've been down in this room before, right?" "No." "I thought so." He could almost see the ghost of Sasuke, his face that impetuous shell, torturing someone for whatever reason. Who had he become here, under the influence of Orochimaru? His head lowered, his teeth clenched, and his forearm pulsed hot. He sensed that Sasuke was shifting and attempting to turn to face him. "What?" With his right fist curling, Naruto shook his head and moved as far away from Sasuke as the chains would permit. "It just hurts," he muttered, "but I'm fine." Sasuke was about to speak, but silence prevailed, and he spent the remainder of the night in its agonizing embrace. A fascinating past or self-mutilation. After a while, he started talking and wouldn't stop until he could no longer stand the silence. Realizing that Naruto was slipping, Sasuke listened in silence. "I was powerless to stop myself those 2 weeks ago. I gave in because, for the first time, someone was present. I had to. After that, I returned home to talk to Danzo. Even my new apartment was shown to me. I leapt onto the bed, but Yamato declared he was eager to see me, so I was unable to sleep. Even though it was only for a short while, seeing everyone else made me feel at home. I mean, it's awful to be a prisoner. It makes you homesick. However, they examined me, spoke to me in a friendly manner, and gave me some delicious ramen." "When did you get arrested, then?" With the pleasant ramblings Sasuke was familiar with, he had been delaying that. Naruto lowered his head even more. "Danzo, he inquired about you." Naruto knew that his happy time of homecoming was over and that he would never sleep in his house again because he could still feel his skin tingle and his heart stop beating at the abrupt change. "I'll ask you once more. Uchiha Sasuke is where?" Naruto's eyes never left the floorboards. "This village is in danger if you don't respond. You will be arrested for being a traitor. Just tell us," Yamato pleaded, "because we both know that's not you." There was still no movement, no blinking, and no attempt at self-defense. "You're just a kid. Don't throw away your future like this." Yamato let out a sigh of regret. When his telepathic prayer was not answered, Danzo raised his hand, telling him to take action. The Hokage's voice angrily ordered, "Arrest this rogue, Captain Yamato," adding that since he is the Jinchuriki, you must be placed over him. He will be sent to Intel for additional interrogation. The life of Uzumaki Naruto as a Konoha shinobi ended abruptly. When the interrogation resumes, Sasuke focuses most of his attention on him to protect Naruto and try to protect their identities because he thinks Naruto would lose the transformation easily. Noritaka is heavily inspired by 1984 S. O'Brien, and I won't even try to explain without the scenes to show the context, but trust me, this guy seems good, has his reasoning, seems reasonable, but still on the wrong side. However, since they aren't communicating, he must take action. His limbs were twisted tightly in their restraints, and he was shaking violently as he felt numerous sharp feet dancing around on his stomach and wanted to throw up again. He could manage this, though. You're in for another surprise if you think you can frighten me with rats." Unable to resist the subsequent grimace that resulted from a clawed foot scratching along his lower stomach, he spat between clenched teeth. "Were the good Kami in a rage?" "You see, rats are pretty good at burrowing," the man said, striking a match and holding it closer to the bowl resting on his bare stomach. "To get away from danger, they will claw their way through anything, even flesh. Organs. I promise you that it will be extremely painful." Naruto would have shriveled back even more if he hadn't already been prostrated. "You're bluffing. That's not possible. You claimed that I had an odd chakra, and that I would die before you could get any answers if you did this." Sweat trickled down his face, and he was panting. "You have 1 minute to decide, or you and your friend can decide. If not, your jutsu will end and the rats will make sure you die. You can't frighten me in this way." 30 seconds. He could already sense the creatures starting to panic as the match got closer to the bowl. No. He avoided his eyes and only had his head pointing down as he looked desperately at Sasuke. "Kurama, you must." "Yes, exactly. It was sage mood, but that required meditation, and you couldn't meditate while you're hyperventilating, which he was doing very hard. He's bluffing, which is why Sasuke is also refusing to let go." Any attempt to play it tough was shattered as what felt like hundreds of pins started to tear his skin apart, and then the bowl caught fire and the clawing began. As they tore through his skin and started eating through meat, he screamed and flailed against the restraints. Then, to Naruto's aggressive acclaim, the man swatted the bowl away, and the rats scampered with it. He lay there, wheezing, tears and sweat streaming down his face, his insides pulsing with pain. All of a sudden, the air became completely silent except for the rabid rodents screeching. Something had stopped these people from bluffing, but he hadn't broken the sealed trance. "Whoa! Look who's here." It isn't Orochi's little pet, though. After Sasuke was knocked down by the sucker punch, his captors simply let him go and laughed to themselves. Their hatred for him was so evident that they literally moved aside to give Sachihiro complete access, and he came joyfully with a steel rod in his hand. "There was something about those eyes that I knew, and they have consistently irritated me, boy." His eyebrow flicked blood as the rod swung, slashing towards his face and narrowly avoiding it at the last second. With a fierce hiss, Sasuke said, "You're going to regret that." "Oh, am I?" Naruto struggled frantically but futilely with what followed. "Stop it." A guard beside him chuckled for a moment, then turned to Noritaka. "How should we handle this one?" A finger traced at his forearm, and Sage Eyes took in the blonde, reading him in a new way. "Whoever he is. He's important to the Uchiha. Have the medic heal and drug him until a leader is ready to meet him." Naruto can only speculate as to whether Sasuke broke the transformation out of friendship or simply out of a desire to keep the Kyuubi. The two are separated, apparently permanently, and Sasuke is blindfolded. He woke up to a drain and paralysis. "I can't do it, it's more than I can." She whimpered as she fell backwards, above him, battling valiantly to seize more of the Kyuubi's chakra. Slap. A male, her brother, entered to try to console her, but she stayed composed and waited until the guard left the room before breaking down in tears. "Just a little while longer, then we can leave this place, alright? Even if I die, I just don't want to do this anymore," she sobbed. "I want to leave now." Kabuto said he'd have a treatment, "We just have to wait for the next justification. Nothing can make what I have better, brother. There is nothing that can save me." "You've been listening to the spy. He is correct. They want me to do that eye surgery this Friday, and they will kill me if even the smallest thing goes wrong and the Sharingan is accidentally destroyed. Or harm you. I'm not capable. I'd rather not." Awakens once more, in a wing of a prison. He was genuinely disturbed by the trail of blood lining the hallway and the eerie feeling that he knew exactly who it belonged to, not by the fact that he was alone in a small cell surrounded by cells so full of filthy people that most of them were standing. He leaned against the wall, struggling to maintain any semblance of hope as he considered their predicament and how Sasuke had voluntarily dropped it. They detest him deeply, and since he possesses the Sharingan, they will tear them away from him. That is a lot of blood. This isn't going to work because the team hadn't talked about what to do in the event that something went wrong. Perhaps Karen was correct. His hands were already tied behind his back, his chakra had siphoned off to a dangerously low level, and if he dropped the dam, they would know who he was and he was in a bad spot, which would only make matters worse. He knew this would happen, so why did he break it that way? When a guard outside one of the other cells threw a tray of food at a man who was also in a cell alone, Naruto's melancholy mood was interrupted by a little commotion, and he immediately wondered why he was kept apart from the other inmates. Another guard chuckled and said, "You're lucky we need you to sign things for the new man, else we could have more kinds of fun with you." "Your Highness," the guard teasingly said as the poor man shuddered back. Hold on a second. Is this the daimyo? Naruto spoke up after the guards had departed, saying, You the daimyo? He looked like a shell of a person, shrunken down from lack of food, and appeared momentarily taken aback before looking over. What's left of him? He asked. You're the one who let the snake in. He was unable to control the angry tone of his voice as he made the accusation. You brought this on yourself, you know that? You are worthy of all of this. The man appeared on the verge of tears, and Naruto felt a somber sense of accomplishment. Many things could have been avoided if this man hadn't turned a blind eye as Orochimaru continued to grow. He allowed the devil to enter his territory, and now Sasuke and many others were suffering as a result. The thought of Sasuke and the way the underling captain had beaten him made Naruto wince, and he knew that was only the beginning. You wretch, you killed my partner. What exactly had Sasuke done under Orochimaru? Naruto couldn't even begin to imagine the world Sasuke had lived in. There was so much about it that he didn't even know, and to come to terms with the fullness of this truth in this way. Kurama, what should I do? There are a lot of people here, and even if my chakra weren't low enough to teleport, I still need to find Sasuke and the head. The sound of movement roused him from his slumber, and he leaned against the bars and whispered to the man in the next cell, Where are they taking those people? The man cast a sorrowful glance around the group and said, No one knows for sure, but they do this periodically. They take the weaklings usually, or those who cause trouble, and they never come back. When a boy was added to the line, Naruto's eyes grew wide. The individual continued, I believe they're to be used by Kabuto for whatever purposes he needs them for. Why are they taking a child? That's just a child. I can only imagine that his suffering will be brief in comparison to a life here, he said, shaking his head, but the other man simply shook his head solemnly. I wish I were one of the chosen sometimes. At least then, I would have a reason to live and be able to contribute to advancement. He was shaking with rage now. Can you even hear yourself? The guards and sound prisoners both stared at him as his voice grew louder and reverberated throughout the room. One of them slammed the end of his spear against his cell door and yelled, Stop it. Naruto, however, was anything but silent. You guys outnumber the guards. Now that you're out of the cells, fight back. Tries to incite a rebellion. A small flame of hope flickered briefly in the eyes of those waiting in line, like a ball of snow gaining size and momentum as it tumbles down a hill. A fight broke out, and for a brief moment the guards appeared unsure of how to react, as fists collided with weapons before a taut weapon shot out. A crossbow dangled from a guard's arm, and the boy dropped to the ground with an arrow sticking out of his head before it. The place fell silent. Naruto received a finger pointing at him. Let the instigator replace him. His little friend with whom he was chatting will suffice, but we can't touch that one. He is a negative role model. There are always outsiders. To prevent them from rebelling, make sure his hands are severed. All Naruto could do was curl up inside himself and shrink back. Although it would have been simple to blame the girl, the sound, or the drugs for stealing his chakra, the only person he could truly blame was himself. No amount of speeches or bluster would change the fact that others were hurt more the more he spoke out. When a guard noticed him, he scooted over to the bars and said, Tell Noritaka I'm ready to talk now. Noritaka, who has Naruto drugged so he can't contact the fox, is pleased with what he had already started to suspect when Naruto reveals himself. Naruto is brought face.to. Face with the evil head, just as Sasuke had predicted, because they are now deemed worthy of the man's time. The head gladly believes he can profit greatly from Sasuke's head, take the Kyuubi's power from Naruto, and use him to overthrow Kabuto in his little power, hungry game. The guards had underestimated how Naruto's chakra would fight off the drug, so just as he is about to be crippled as the head had ordered, he breaks free and attacks, ending the head and making his underlings completely terrified. He also encourages the others to fight back again, this time acknowledging that some may die, but how many more if they just do nothing? He must approach it this way because of the previous samurai episode, realizing that he's not alone in his desire for peace and that there are other hurting people as well. They use that fear to their advantage, overthrowing the entire empire and releasing the populace while imprisoning and sending criminals to Konoha. Naruto's brother is placed in charge of him just in case, and he assures Naoko that he will have his friend help find a cure for her condition. They also release the daimyo and make it very clear that they won't save him again if he messes up with people like Orochimaru again. His time in prison has made him truly sorry. Sasuke suspected that he had been purposefully left on the table for longer than necessary, and by this point, his eyes had appeared to dry after a stream of tears from the severe strain that constant exposure had put them through. He had been strapped to a table, with small metal digits forcing his eyelids open. He collapsed into them, his eyes closing but still full of painful color that webbed across his eyelids before fading into a deep black. Suddenly there was a commotion, noise, and the metal that was binding him was being torn apart. He couldn't see who had freed him, only a blurry figure hovering over him, their words incomprehensible. He was awakened by voices. A shocked and horrified, "What the hell happened?" They captured him. It was Naruto's voice, and I doubt he'll survive if we don't get him some serious medical help. You understand why we're unable to do that. After an argument, Sasuke realized he was back with the Taka, but it was barely worth the thought as he fell into a deeper sleep and felt the pain returning along with a grim dizziness. He thought it was death, but it didn't seem to be today. Soon after, he felt warm, and the sleep became almost pleasant. He snapped awake, alert, and took in the situation. He could figure out that they had placed damp bandages around his eyes and cast his broken arm and leg, but he was unable to figure out the chakra that had healed him. It was a weak, weary whisper, "Don't move." His healer must have been worn out, and they were good to have repaired what they had done, to the extent that they had. He sat up, said, "Thank you," and grimaced as a tiny sting went down his back. "You need to lay down." He was familiar with that voice, but it was not possible. A gentle hand caught his wrists and stopped him as he began to push at the linens that were wrapped around his eyes. "Your eyes can't handle the light right now." Something deep inside him felt a certain sound in her voice, a sound that belonged to someone who had just had a good cry. He remarked, "Maybe they never could." He heard the strain, felt her breath, and heard her heartbeat. "Sasuke." "HN." Careful not to touch his lacerated back, arms wrapped themselves around him. "I know everything now." It was just a simple statement, but her gentle voice as her hair touched his, something about being held. "Additionally, I am aware of what you did for Naruto. I am aware that you did it to protect more than just the Kyuubi." He remained silent. "Your family is very important to you, however, they are no longer there. I want you to know that, even though I can't replace them, you can always count on me. Even though you're not ready yet, I am." Then, for no apparent reason, a gentle presence touched his lips, and he gave up in that instant, that weak, vulnerable instant. They shared a kiss. She whispered, "Thank you," and withdrew after the conversation. "I know that when I go, this was only a dream, a delirium, or a falsification, but I think you'll know the truth deep down. You're still here. And I'll wait until you're prepared to acknowledge that. I may be pitiful for that, but I still adore you." Sakura walked away with her shoulders squared but her chakra completely depleted. "You all right?" Quietly, Naruto inquired. "If necessary, tie him to the bed, he must recover." "I'll try, but wouldn't you be better for that?" Naruto chuckled. "Oh, shut up." The blonde took her hand and they walked away with a gentle, weary smile instead of a dramatic push or punch. With her head pointing downward and her hair covering her face, Karen sat off to the side, her arms tightly gripping her stomach, but the swordman managed to catch the tear that fell. "Hey," he said, passing her a blanket. She pushed it away with a sniff, already attempting to gather her thoughts, but she knew she couldn't after seeing Suigetsu. Whispering, "I can never be that," she said. Then stopped trying to be. She leaned against him and fell asleep.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.